Well, that's all ahead. BPR live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Top officials from 3 immigration agencies are testifying before a House committee today. Lawmakers are examining the Trump administration's immigration operations. This follows the killings of 2 Minneapolis protesters by federal immigration agents last month. Todd Lyons is the acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. He insisted ICE will continue to carry out President Trump's directives.
But let me send a message to anyone who thinks they can intimidate us. You will fail. Despite these perils, our officers continue to execute their mission with unwavering resolve, and we are only getting started.
Funding for the Department of Homeland Security will run out at the end of this week unless Congress passes a spending bill. Democrats are first demanding changes in the agency's operations. A group of bipartisan lawmakers were given access yesterday to unredacted files of the investigation into late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. But Congressman Thomas Massey and Ro Khanna say some of the information was still redacted, including the names of 6 men. They're demanding that the Justice Department publish these. The congressmen allege the men were involved in Epstein's actions. Today's show host Savannah Guthrie has released another online message. NPR's Bill Chappell reports she is asking for help in finding her mother.
Nancy Guthrie's family last saw her on January 31st in Tucson. Law enforcement says she was unwillingly taken from her home. Savannah Guthrie has posted a new video asking for assistance to find her mother.
We are at an hour of desperation, and we need your help.
Guthrie pleaded for anyone who might know something about where her mother is to contact police. Local media have received ransom notes related to Nancy Guthrie, but the FBI says it isn't aware of any, quote, continued communication between the Guthrie family and suspected kidnappers. Bill Chappell, NPR News.
The government of Indonesia says it is preparing to send troops to Gaza. This is part of the U.S. brokered ceasefire agreement. NPR's Daniel Estrin has more from Tel Aviv.
Indonesia, the world's most populous Muslim country, is the first to announce it's training thousands of soldiers for potential deployment to Gaza. The U.S. is trying to stand up an international stabilization force in Gaza, but it's still unclear what the force's mandate would be. President Trump's Board of Peace is meeting next week in Washington to raise funds for Gaza reconstruction. Israel says it opposes reconstruction until Hamas is disarmed. Meanwhile, attacks continue in Gaza. Health officials there say several Palestinians were killed by Israeli fire. The Israeli military says it struck Hamas militants after armed Palestinians emerged from a tunnel and shot at soldiers. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrials are up more than 200 points. You're listening to NPR.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell. Congresswoman Catherine Clark says she was denied access to the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement's Burlington field office when she tried to make an unannounced visit yesterday. She says her office has received multiple complaints about the facility, including that people are being held there for long periods despite it only being a processing center.
We have heard that people are being kept there way past when they should be. They are having trouble accessing basic things like showers and really critical constitutional things like their lawyers.
Clark says department officials pointed to a memo from DHS Secretary Kristi Noem requiring members of Congress to make a request to visit 7 days in advance, but she points to a recent federal court order granting some members of Congress a specific right to enter DHS facilities without notice. Local athletes are getting the opportunity they've devoted their lives to at the Winter Olympics today. Southborough native Corey Dropkin is part of the mixed doubles curling pair facing off against Sweden this afternoon. Maxim Naumov, who trains at the Skating Club of Boston, makes his Olympic debut in the men's single short program.
My dad always said, it's all practice until the Olympics, and I'm starting to see what he's talking about.
The Connecticut native lost both his parents in the midair collision involving a plane and an Army helicopter near Washington, D.C. last year. More snow is on the way for us tonight. 1 to 3 inches of snow forecast for the Boston area. You'll most likely see the first flakes this afternoon. Sun and clouds this morning, highs in the 30s. Sunny tomorrow, highs in the 20s with clouds Wednesday night. Right now, it's 27 in Boston.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, investing in creative thinkers and problem solvers who help people, communities, and the planet flourish. More information is available at hewlett.org.
Listening to BPR and GBH and NEPM, Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com. Thank you, /GBH News. Mayor Michelle Wu will be with us from noon to 1 today, taking our questions and yours here at the library. Good morning, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. Empty desks at political offices, resigning ambassadors, police investigations into misconduct. The fallout from the Epstein files is hitting the European and specifically UK elite hard. Both the Chief of Staff and Communications Director for the Prime Minister of Britain, Keir Starmer, have left their jobs over connections to Epstein. Press reports say the Prime Minister himself is holding on by a thread. A former Prime Minister of Norway is currently under police investigation for his involvement. But of course, that's over there. Here in the USA, mostly political crickets, as even more and more wealthy men and some women are publicly named with virtually no consequences. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick remains in his post despite lying about his ongoing connection to Epstein. John Fallon, Trump's Navy Secretary, traveled on at least 2 transatlantic flights on Epstein's 727. Not to mention Trump himself appearing in the files thousands of times, along with Musk, Steve Bannon, Bill Gates, and apparently many leaders on college campuses across the country, including the president of Bard. There's an incredible story about this guy in the New York Times. Much accountability there, almost no accountability here. Why? Is it because shame is dead in America? Accountability, is it passé in this country? Or is this what we should have expected if we went through a supposed reckoning with Me Too that left much of the system which enabled such bad behavior intact? The number is 877-301-8970. Why such different sets of consequences in Europe to revelations about Epstein connections as compared to the nothing burger that we have here? What's your explanation?
Well, one fascinating thing is that one of these stories talks about the British press being relentless. When they see a scalp, they go after it. And here we have a bifurcated press where you hear one thing on Fox and right-wing websites, you hear another thing on left-wing websites. I mean, I think it's fair to say the liberal media was much too nice to Bill Clinton when he was carrying on back in the day with Monica Lewinsky. But I think
there was an exception to that. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, I know.
Who the one columnist was?
Well, there were other people besides me. Well, I was one of them. There were other people besides me that said it was a disgrace. But anyway, Anand Girdadas, who we have on the show many times, and he's just a brilliant analyst, and he talks about that this is like this Epstein class, this class of entitled billionaires that never really have to deal with real people. I mean, they are the same people that were involved in the 2008 housing crash when Barack Obama, one of his big mistakes, stood up for the banks instead of the people that lost their homes. They were kind of okay with the opioid crisis that was taking millions, supporting the drug companies. They were okay with monopolies. They high tech companies that are addicting millions of people to. European countries do things about that sort of thing, about tech companies. They do things about the environment. They do things about
So you think this precedes
healthcare.
Trump? The death of shame in politics in particular,
I think Trump
in high places?
is putting on high speed, the shame loss. But look at the United States of America. I mean, we don't do things for decades for housing concerns, for health concerns, for childcare concerns, for worker concerns. Money is the root of all evil, and money is what runs America, and it's kind of a sad state of affairs.
877-301-8970. The only person who's holding Gates accountable is his ex-wife, I should say.
I know, isn't it
great? You know, I
great?
left off this list, the owner of the New York Giants, that Tisch guy.
Oh, yeah.
That guy, what is the T, his first name?
Oh, Peter. Oh, God. He's really horrible.
He was the health influencer. We can't repeat his quote. He talked about a really foul comment about women's genitalia, for lack of a
the same thing
expression
said
Trump
he
did
grabbed
on Access
because
Hollywood.
everybody didn't mind.
Has he been fired by CBS News?
No,
he's a new commentator.
He's a new commentator. There, many people saw him a few weeks ago. He was on there talking about how you're 75 is the crucial age for something or other. He's a longevity kind of guy. But there was a great anecdote about how apparently his infant son nearly died, and his wife, a nurse practitioner, rushed in and gave the newborn CPR, and then the child was rushed to the hospital, and the wife is calling him and says, please come home, please come home, please come home. Well, it took him 10 days to come home.
No, is that true?
And a part of the reason it apparently took him 10 days because he had a meeting planned with Jeffrey Epstein during those 10 days.
That is great.
I mean, I hope he doesn't last. The story is that Barry Weiss, who's the new person that runs CBS in 60 Minutes, was talk about fluff. Last Sunday night was just total fluff on 60 Minutes. But in any case, she's worried that if she fires Peter Attia, that she'll look like she's giving into cancel culture.
By the way, the one thing you may have been as confused as we were. Margie and I both came in this morning saying, why is there such pressure on the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer, and these people who were connected to Epstein worked for him? Well, it turns out when he appointed this Mandelson guy, ambassador to the U.S., he knew that Mandelson had an Epstein connection. So I have to say, he may be gone before the end of the day, but virtually no consequences here.
Lutnick,
I mean, the guy who's Lutnick, I was just going to say.
It's so unbelievable.
Explain the story again.
Lutnick gives an interview in I think it was 2005 in the New York Post. He says he was so disgusted. He lived next door to Peter Epstein. He goes to Jeffrey Epstein. Goes to the Epstein house. There's a massage table there, and he says, "Oh, it's kind of odd, massage table in the middle of the house. How often do you get a massage?" And Epstein says, "Every day." And they're the right kind, or something like that. And Lutnick says he was so disgusted. He's so disgusted that 7 years later, he and his wife, he's going to bring his children, and his wife is on board to go visit Epstein at the island. This is in 2012. And then a few years after that, Epstein donated $50,000 in honor of Ludwig to some event. So Ludwig totally lied. No problem. He can be the Secretary of Commerce. No problem. So and Steve Bannon is in this group as well. So
not only no problem, Pirro, the U.S. Attorney for D.C., is applying to the court to get his conviction overturned. No, by the way, a first anonymous texter, I think, thinks that I am part of the problem, and I think it's not. Totally off base. No one is accountable here. Bankers crashed the economy, Bush administration torture, war crimes, January 6th, Trump pardons drug dealers, financial crimes, and we all just keep shopping at Amazon and driving our Teslas. I mean, there's a lot of truth to that.
And I think I think that there's an attitude about women here and young girls, obviously, that they were just, who cares? Who cares what happens to them? There were all these young girls on the airplanes, in some cases young, they weren't all 13. Some of them were, 19, 20, and 21. Well, Jamie Raskin said he read something about a 9-year-old, 10-year-old, and 11-year-old in the recently unredacted files. We haven't heard more about that. But there was
unredacted for members of Congress only. Right. And even some of them are still redacted.
Well, that's the other joke. They've only got 4 computers in there, the Department of Justice. They're supposed to go in through millions of pages.
How about the 3 million documents they won't even release to begin with, despite the law? 877-301-8970. Why is there such accountability and consequence in Europe and such little accountability and consequence here? Leslie in a car, you're first on BPR. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hello there. How are you doing?
Very well. Thanks for calling.
Good. I'm British, and we've lived here in the U.S. for the last 14 years and loved living here until the last year. Unfortunately, there is no accountability for our politicians and our wealthy individuals here. We've loved it here so much that we became U.S. citizens and had no intentions of going back. But I am so sickened by this culture that I've had enough. And even more so now that the British are holding their politicians accountable for the behavior of themselves.
Do you think Starmer has to go, Leslie?
Oh, absolutely. He knew, and that's unacceptable was someone that knew that Epstein was involved with Mandelson.
So, Leslie, since
you never have appointed him.
Since you've lived in both cultures, how do you explain the dramatic difference in consequence for bad behavior there and here?
I'm not sure I can explain it. I'm extraordinarily surprised that people just accept this behavior of wealthy people. And I think that there's been a big change in this last 4 or 5 years. And I think, unfortunately, it's down to a certain person in the White House.
Yeah.
Yeah, Leslie, we're really, really glad you called, and we hope you call us again and hope you stay. Leslie, thanks for the call.
I mean, look what we're doing right now. You know, people talk about how they can't afford their houses, they can't afford their rent, they can't afford their health care. And where are the big tax breaks going to go? To the people that belong to the Epstein class. I mean, the oligarchy's running the country. Trump's cabinet is full of billionaires. Do you think they understand what it's like to, you know, go to get in a commercial airline and take a flight somewhere? No, they don't mix. They don't see. There's a lack of empathy and understanding there, I think.
Well, you know, this whole thing about the absence or the death of shame, you know, I think we know that Donald, this is not an excuse, an explanation. Donald Trump has a disease. It's pretty clear when, you know, the most recent example is the failure to apologize for those grotesque racist images of the Obamas. But the fact that all of his people toe the line from Carolyn Levitt on down, why don't they feel shame? Is it just
I don't know.
They adopt the shamelessness of the boss?
Caroline Levitt got up and said it was no problem.
No, in fact, you should be ashamed if you're even raising the issue.
Yeah, so it was. You know, there was a problem with the Trump tweet that showed Barack and Michelle Obama as apes. No problem.
She did. Alex in Walpole.
And it's no problem what they're doing to people on the streets of Minnesota. No problem.
Alex in Walpole, hello.
Hey, yeah, I third-time caller.
Thanks.
Listen to you guys a lot. In fact, I had to come to you late. I didn't actually like the show originally. I'm a transplant from Utah. Jim, I thought you were kind of hard on Marjorie. Sometimes I couldn't understand what you were saying, but I'm a big fan.
Good.
Oh, okay. I'm glad
Marjorie, I can understand you perfectly now. Maybe it's my Utah ears.
I don't know.
Have I gotten any better, or just Marjorie?
Jim, you have not gotten. You don't get fat. Jim, we can be hard on you.
Okay. Well, we're glad you stuck around. What's up?
Yeah. So I'm just thinking of Winston Churchill's quote that you can always count on the Americans to do the right thing once they've exhausted the alternative.
Yeah.
So we have to go through all the, the bad steps but there's another thing. I think in America we have kind of a unique, like even poor people consider themselves sometimes, often it seems to me, temporarily disenfranchised billionaires. Like we all feel like we have to protect the billionaires because we're going to be there one day. You know, we can, and I think maybe it's the American, the way that we were founded by the bootstrapping kind of Pilgrims and Puritans that, the can-do kind of people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like that we have a unique kind of reverence almost for these people.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
Down.
Alex.
I think it's breaking down more, but I feel like there's still some of that.
Alex, I'm going to try harder if you stick around. So stay tuned and thanks for your call.
I think it's worth remembering that Richard Nixon resigned in shame. That was not that long ago. That was in the 70s, right? I mean, the Republicans went to him and said, "You can't stay here. You are a crook. You got to get out of here." I mean, we have a crook in the White House, and his poll numbers are going down. But the people that voted, nearly half of the people that voted for him.
Well, that's the most significant change, though, is Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
Howard Baker and others who ended up going of his own party went to see. And by the way, just so that we haven't got any text on this yet, but about what I'm about to mention, that while I would say Trump is the king of the shameless brigade. Remember the guy, I'll think of his name in a minute, who ran for attorney general and won in Virginia, who it was disclosed in a text had said he'd like to something like shoot the Republican Speaker of the House in the head, and virtually no Democrats abandoned him, and he ended up winning because all the
that's a very good point.
Again, he's not Donald Trump.
Listen,
but
it's both sides.
It is.
I think it's both sides. Chuck Schumer
It's not equal, I should say.
Chuck Schumer has been a big protector of Wall Street from my
reading. That is
reading.
totally true.
Has he not?
He has. Okay. 877-301-8970. We're talking about shamelessness in this country versus consequences in across the Atlantic Ocean. Allison Dedham, how are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm pretty good. Actually, for this world that we're living in.
Yeah.
But I really think that we have to face the fact that Hillary Clinton had it right a long time ago when she called a group of people the deplorables in this country. And I think the deplorables are really in power, and that there is a large group of men that think this is perfectly acceptable behavior. This isn't shameless to them at all. They're all a little jealous of how many girls these guys have had. They really don't mind that sleeping with minors is that big a deal. Everybody probably.
By the way, can I correct one thing you said? They didn't sleep with minors. They raped minors. I know that's what you meant.
I totally agree, but I'm saying from their perspective, they're seeing it different. And we have to admit this is disgusting and been around a long time, and it's been a big secret, and everybody's doing everything they can. They denied it for as long as they could. And now they're pointing in every other direction. It wasn't me. It was him. It was him. It was him.
Or I didn't know. And that's, you're right. You were right. Alice, thank you.
You know what's
for the
incredible,
call.
too? When you read, how did this guy had time to do all these things? It's like he knew everybody. They go through this list. It was the Republicans, the Democrats, the business people, the tech people, the diplomats, the philanthropists, the professors. Deepak Chopra, Mr. Let's all go off in silence and meditate. Apparently, they were exchanging emails about whether there was an eternity or not. And then he was like a psychiatrist to people that were sending him emails about their father died and they were depressed and they were lonesome. I mean, my goodness, he had all these massages, plus he's flying around the world, plus he's got emailing like hundreds and hundreds of top people in the world, all these foreign countries too. I mean,
well, how about, let's also not forget across the river. There's some...
Larry Summers.
Yep,
and his wife.
You mentioned Chomsky. What's the Chomsky connection?
Noam Chomsky. Yeah, apparently Epstein asked Chomsky for advice when he was getting in trouble, and I think Chomsky advised him to ignore it. And his wife has apologized. Chomsky apparently he's 94. He's been
but didn't have him when he was 94.
Right, but he's been debilitated by a stroke. I guess that's why his wife was answering and saying they apologized for their grave lack of judgment about Jeffrey Epstein. But he obviously was mesmerized people. Molly Fass has got a great line in her column when she writes in the New York Times, says, Vladimir Putin seems to be the only person that wasn't sucked in by Jeffrey Epstein.
The reason I was laughing when I called Alice Elise, have you ever seen one of the funniest skits ever by Key and Peele? It's by Key.
Yeah,
when he's a substitute teacher.
No.
And he says, he's calling the roll, and he says, D-Nice. Is D-Nice here? Of course, her name is Denise. Jaquiline, are you here? It's one of the funniest bits ever. Check it out. It's called Substitute Teacher.
What made you think of that?
What? Because I called her Elise rather than Alice.
Okay.
Hey, Louise in Marblehead, you're next. Hi.
Hi, guys. Love you both.
Thank you.
What's interesting to me is about, 8 years ago, there was a scandal in Japan having to do with the Mitsubishi company. They'd have been the airbags, I forget what. But they brought the guy, the chairman of Mitsubishi, bring him out onto the stage, and his head is hung. He's shameful. He's remorseful. And you know what? It makes me admire. I mean, that was the end of the story. He was out. There was no fanfare, no nothing. And I don't think there's a whole lot wrong with being a little shameful and a little guilty. I think it makes people more honest.
I don't think, when you say I don't think there's anything wrong with it, I think it's the right thing to do. Compare that to Bill Gates' interviews, by the way, since there's been disclosure about his connections there. And after he was called out, I think brilliantly, as I said, by his ex-wife in an interview about a week ago. Louise, thank you for an excellent call. We appreciate it.
You know, we should mention Brad Karp, too. He used to be
that's a good one.
chairman of the board of Paul Weiss, and people may recall that Paul Weiss was the first big-time law firm, millions and millions and millions of dollars, that capitulated to Trump when Trump said he was going to go after them, and they volunteered to do $40 million worth of pro bono work for the Trump administration. I wonder if they're working for ICE now.
Well, he paid a small price because you explained to me this morning, while he's no longer the head of the firm, he's still at the firm.
Yes.
Is that not right?
He was trying to get his son a job. He wanted Epstein to help him get his son a job in a Woody Allen film, and he emailed him about that. I don't know if the son got the job in the Woody Allen film or not.
Is he the guy who Robert Kraft worked through to...
I think that, they were talking
with Trump.
Yes,
yeah.
Kraft and the Paul Weiss law firm have
Brad
something
Karp,
to do with dealing with Trump coming after them.
Carol in Saugus, you're next. Hi, Carol.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
I just want to say that this country has always been run for the benefit of the wealthy and the powerful, and for hundreds of years. And it's no different now. It's just an exposed war now, but there will be no consequences. And for us to pretend that there will be, I think is a joke.
Well, there are no consequences for anything.
But Carol, with due respect, we were not always run like this. We had a president called Franklin Delano Roosevelt who, after the horrors of the Great Depression, went out and regulated capitalism and gave people jobs and put in Social Security and help for poor people. Capitalism was regulated. Wealthy people paid enormous amounts in taxes right through Ronald Reagan. This is a recent development, this kind of just rollover for billionaires. It wasn't always like this.
Carol, we got to let you go only because you have a horrible connection. Cheryl in Boston says, as my 22-year-old daughter says, this country hates women. We have to acknowledge that. I think there is a decent amount of truth.
I hope we all don't hate women.
Well, how about Donald Trump?
Well, I mean, look at the way he talks to women and treats women.
Exactly.
And I love the fact that the people that have gone up against him have been women like Nancy Pelosi and Lynn Cheney. I love that part.
You wanted to mention one thing we both did, but you're going to take the lead.
I did. We have talked a lot about Enrique Delgado Garcia. He was a recruit in the state police, and he died during training for the state police. Well, finally, we have some results, news on that front. 4 state police academy instructors have been indicted on involuntary manslaughter charges over the 2024 death of Delgado Garcia. We're going to talk more about this later in the week. But the special prosecutor announced this Monday after this investigation. So involuntary manslaughter charges against 4 state police academy
instructors. It's a long time, but there's apparently maybe some accountability there.
Yep, a former Suffolk County prosecutor, David Meyer, is the guy who was in charge of the investigation. So anyway,
appointed by the AG. So when the AG's in, we'll talk to her about it.
Yep. Are we done with this? Or
we are.
Moving on to Trenni Casey now?
We are.
Okay. We're moving on to Trenni Casey now. We're going to talk with NBC Sports Boston's Trenni Casey at the BPL. She's zooming in about the Olympics, which she has been covering a rundown of all things curling, of course, and Lindsey Vonn and what's going on there. I'm Marjorie Egan. He's Jim Browder. You're listening to BPR on GBH and NEPM live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. Margery Egan, Jim Browdy. We are live at the library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Mayor Wu will join us in 35 minutes for an hour of Ask the Mayor live here at the library. We're joined now on Zoom by NBC Boston's Trenni Casey. She's calling in us from her 6th Olympic assignment with NBC. This year she's a network cable host. Hey there, Trenni.
Hi guys, how are you?
Well, we're
great to see you.
Great to talk to you, Trenni. So give us the highs and the lows to date. What should we be happy about, sad about?
Well, you should be happy about how well Team USA has started. Breezy Johnson won the first gold in the Alpine downhill the other day. Obviously, my favorite Team USA curling, Corey Teesey and Corey Dropkin. Corey Dropkin's actually from Southborough, Mass. Originally. But they now train in Duluth, Minnesota. They are going for gold at 12:05 p.m. today against Team Sweden. It'll be the first ever medal for a mixed doubles curling team in U.S. history. And no matter what happens, Corey Teesey, who is the female on the mixed doubles team, she'll be the first female U.S. curler to ever win a medal of any kind. The not so great, of course, is what happened with Lindsey Vonn. I mean, everybody was just pulling for her. She really wanted to compete in Cortina on a mountain that she's had a lot of success on. And of course, she had that terrible crash on Sunday, I believe it was, where she had a complex tibia fracture. It's going to take multiple surgeries. I would imagine her career is probably after an ACL tear, a fractured tibia, 41 years old, is over. But we can never know with Lindsey Vonn. She is a fighter.
Can I just mention, I have to do the mandatory I'm not a doctor kind of thing. And I know that either Vaughn, I think Vaughn in either an Instagram post or something said the injury that she had 9 days before the Olympics had nothing to do with it. But let me question that for a second and say, is there any role on the part of the people who run, for example, the downhill skiing franchise for the United States to ensure that a participant is healthy enough to perform, or is it solely up to the individual athlete?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, when you're 41 years old and you've been competing as long as Lindsey Vonn, unless the doctors, felt like she would be in like mortal danger, they would allow her to compete. But everything the doctors said, her trainers, her coach, she couldn't do further damage to the ACL. And like a tibia fracture is your bone, it's below your knee, but I don't think that had anything to do with it. She just took a turn the wrong way and she crashed. Like that doesn't, again, not a doctor, but I don't think an ACL would then cause a tibia fracture. Like I don't think the two are related.
Can I tell you a highlight for me? First of all, this one highlight hasn't happened. This young man, Maxim Naumov from the Boston Skating Club, who lost both of his parents in that horrible plane helicopter crash. We had the leaders of the Boston Skating Club on a couple of months ago. He's skating tonight, and I'm really looking forward to that. Talk about strength. But I have to talk about this 21-year-old kid. I think he's from Virginia. This guy, I'm going to mispronounce it, Ilya Malinin, is that how you say this?
No, that's correct. Ilya Malinin. That's exactly correct.
God, I mean, beyond the backflips on the ice, the movement, I know nothing about skating, by the way, but except I like to watch it. I have never seen anybody do what this guy is doing. I mean, he's amazing.
Well, that's because, Jim, no one is doing what Ilya Malinin is doing. He is the only male, he's the only skater of any gender, but particularly male, who has managed to complete these quad jumps. He's called the quad god. I think the one that no one has ever done is the quadruple axel. Don't quote me on that. Ashley Wagner, who of course is, lives in the Boston area. You guys have had her on the show before. I think she's doing something right now, so I can't ask her if that is it. But I believe that that's his thing. He is the quad god, and he is helped Team USA to their team gold medal in team skating. And then the individual men's programs start today.
That's right. He's very handsome too. He reminds me of the Russian.
Yes.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew it.
Oh, I haven't watched that, Marjorie. I'm still getting through Stranger Things.
Okay, well, you'll enjoy it when you get to it. What about Alyssa Liu, the other big figure skater? She came out of retirement, and she's done really well this year too, right?
She has. The women's individual program hasn't begun, but she was a part of that Team Gold.
Yep.
Her story is just really interesting. She's someone who walked away from skating because she wasn't having fun anymore. And then one day she was downhill skiing and she felt free and like out in the open and cold and had got like this jolt of adrenaline. And she was like, wow, this is what it felt like when I was flying through the air on the ice. And she decided that she wanted to get back into skating. I believe she's 27 years old or 26 years old. So she's an old skater.
Yeah.
But she has a chance at medaling, and she just performs with this calm and this freedom and this joy that I think probably wouldn't be available to her had she not walked away from the sport.
Can I ask you, can we talk about the underside of some of these things? A couple of things we wanted to mention to you. One, we said that based on our limited research, your network, NBC, had killed the sound of Vance being booed, Vice President Vance being booed twice in Milan. Is that true? I'm sorry to put you in the spot. But...
No, it's okay. I mean, obviously, I don't know if that's true. I'm not privy to that kind of information. I was watching it in my hotel room with my husband, who was visiting for the weekend, and my dogs. It felt subdued, right? Like you could hear boos, not vociferously. Obviously, I wasn't able to watch like Canadian Broadcasting Company or the British Broadcasting Company, so I don't know what the difference was. So I'm not entirely sure. And I'm not just saying that because I'm here working and I don't want to get in trouble. I honestly, I don't know. I do know that when it did strike me, Jim, it was, Mary Carrillo, Shaun White, and I believe Terry Gannon were the three talent on the call. It was notable to me that they very quickly referenced him and moved on.
Right. All they said was J.D. Vance.
Right. That is J.D. Vance. And then they moved on. So that to me was notable.
So let's change to something else which doesn't involve NBC or the Olympics itself. Two horrific behaviors, one from Trump, one from trolls and sick people. This skater, Amber Glenn, who made a comment about how tough things are for LGBTQ people in this country, in this political climate, supposedly getting death threats and hate mail. But even worse, I don't know if you can rate them, I shouldn't have said that, but horrible too. Here's Hunter Hess, who was asked, by the way, he didn't volunteer this, representing the United States, skier, asked about representing the U.S. at the Olympics. And here's just a little slice of what Hess had to say.
It brings up mixed emotions to represent the U.S. right now, I think. It's a little hard. There's obviously a lot going on that I'm not the biggest fan of, and I think a lot of people aren't.
And by the way, the next day he said how proud he was to represent the United States. But of course, Donald Trump, who has nothing better to do than watch statements like this as the world is exploding, called him a big loser. He shouldn't have tried out, shouldn't represent the United States. What's the scuttlebutt around this crap that's coming out of Trump?
I think it's like everything right now, Jim, what side of the aisle are you on? I think if you are troubled by what's happening in our country right now, maybe particularly what's going on in Minneapolis, you look at this and see courage. It's not easy, especially for these younger athletes, right? I mean, a lot of these athletes are in their 20s to use their platform to speak up. Michaela Schifrin also, was defended her teammates, quoted Nelson Mandela. And if you have a chance today, guys, I know I keep coming back to curling, but there's a guy by the name of Rich Ruohonen. He's 54 years old. He's an alternate on the men's curling team, which will begin play tomorrow. He's also a lawyer in Minneapolis. He opened their press conference today with a beautiful monologue on the constitutional violations happening right now. Wow. And he lives and trains in Minneapolis. That's where his home is. He's a lawyer in Minneapolis. If you have a chance to watch it, it's about 2 minutes and 15 seconds. It's absolutely beautiful. It's not harsh. It is not emotional. It is just stating the facts and talking about how we need to be there for each other as human beings. And he is so proud of how the way Minneapolis has responded. I don't know what will happen with that. I don't know if he's a big enough name, to get clapback from people. But I think it takes a lot of courage for these athletes
So do I.
to stand up and say something in such a public forum. And they're representing the values of the United States. And one of the things that we shouldn't lose sight of, and I know Sean Duffy's wife seems to think we should have patriots, should take a patriotism test if you want to represent the United States in the Olympics. But patriotism is talking about the bad and the good. It's holding your country to the highest standard. And I'm really proud of the Team USA athletes who have spoken up.
And the skater Amber Glenn too, right? She spoke about it had been a tough year for the LGBT community.
Yes.
She's talking about getting death threats and everything else. So
she had to take a break from social media. Yeah. And let's be honest, I tried to really limit my social media use, but during these 2.5 weeks during the Olympics, I can't get enough of every piece of video that is coming out of Italy. And so for her to take a step away from it because it is harming her mental health and she's receiving death threats, what are we doing? But I guess that's a question I've asked one too many times.
So can we end the Olympic talk where we began? You've told us before. What's the thing that the curlers push down the ice? What's that called?
That's a broom. It's a broom. The stone. Sorry, the stone. Yeah,
broom
it's a
stone. Okay, all right.
It's a broom and a stone. It's 40 pounds, 42 pounds.
Okay.
It's I know everybody sits at home and then they create these home curling things, which are really fun with pots and pans and RoboVacs and stuff.
I haven't done
But
that.
I tried to curl, you guys. It's really hard. These are athletes with a high level skill. Trust me when I tell you, you cannot do it at
Didn't
home.
you do it once?
I did.
It was terrible.
No, Marjorie.
I did it
Marjorie.
too.
Sorry, I can't see you.
I
guys.
get
How'd
it
that
though.
go?
I get it though. It was fun. It was
You
fun.
did?
I mean, it's much harder than it looks because you're having to go down on one knee and stay balanced, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, we have to get to a really important subject, Jim. I mean, people are texting us all about it. Trenni says, somebody who's watching on YouTube, give us your take on Jordan's, that would be the girlfriend of Bill Belichick, her Orchids of Asia Day Spa t-shirt that she wore to that UNC Duke basketball game the other night.
I think this is what the kids do now, snapping. Bravo. I literally like nothing Jordan Hudson does. I loved this. I love this. Because guys, I could not believe that the week, and listen, in fairness, I've been here since February 1st in Connecticut. So my exposure to I haven't seen any local news or local radio conversations, but I've been reading the Globe and reading, NBCSportsBoston.com to keep up with what's going on at home. There was very little mention of Robert Kraft going to the movie premiere of Melania with President Trump.
There was a
leading up to the
lot of
Super
mention
Bowl.
on this show.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. There was, I don't know how much you guys talked about, and I know it was just a small little reference, but Robert Kraft was mentioned in the Epstein files. And so, I guess I don't understand how this didn't become a bigger story at the Super Bowl. So yay, Jordan Hudson, for calling out what everyone else did not want to call out, which is that we don't know what's going on beneath the surface of this, but we know that Jeffrey Epstein was somehow involved, and that can never mean anything good.
Well, by the way, the connection was there was an Epstein lawyer, right, that was recommended for Trump. I have to say, it's fine to praise her for this because, as Marjorie has said 1,000 times, Kraft has he's apologized to everybody except the most important people to apologize to, the women involved. But I have to say, Bill Belichick is a low-rent character in normal times. The fact that this was apparently okay with him proves that he's even lower rent than we know.
He's so petty. He's so
creature.
petty.
Okay, so let's go back to what he used to do, which is coach the Patriots. We only have 2 minutes left. Is there anything that hasn't been said about this disastrous Super Bowl that you'd like to say, Trenni Casey?
I called it.
So, you did?
Did you? I did. I said after they beat Denver, I said they're going to get their doors blown off in the Super Bowl.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I did not think that everyone kept telling me, all the football people kept telling me that, no, Drake May will be fine when the weather's okay. Drake May will be fine when the weather's okay. And I was like, I don't think the weather, other than Denver, there was not significantly adverse weather that would harm the offense, that would like not allow them to put up points. They struggled mightily against really good defenses. And I wondered if Sam Darnold could just keep his hands at 10-2 and basically be Trent Dilfer of years ago, of the early 2000s, could they win? And I kind of got laughed at that I even suggested that was possible. But I just felt like once they faced a healthy offense and another elite defense, that things were going to come to a head, that the warts were going to shine through, and they did.
Okay, 30 seconds.
How many times did he get sacked in the first
3?
3 times?
3 times.
Yeah.
He was sacked 6 times.
What do you think
they
of
have some
6
issues.
times all told. That's a lot of
What
sacks.
do you think of halftime?
Jim, I couldn't. So I was in studio. I was live from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. But we had it on. We had the game on in the studio. I just couldn't hear the broadcast. So I don't know what it sounded like, but it looked beautiful. And you know what, Jim? All I care is that mega heads were exploding coast to coast. That is good enough for me.
Okay.
One honest.
Trenni.
You're getting a lot of applause here, Trenni Casey.
I hope you have a great time down there. I know you miss your husband
Thanks,
and the
guys.
dogs.
Watch tonight.
Yeah.
If you can't watch at 5 p.m. tonight on CNBC, we'll have the gold medal match. Team USA is going to win a medal no matter what. The only question is it gold or is it silver?
5 o'clock, CNBC. Trenni, keep doing it. We'll see you soon.
We've been speaking with Trenni Casey, anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston, remotely from her Olympic post at NBC Sports headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut. Okay, coming up after this quick break, CNN's John King joins for the latest national political headlines. I'm Marjorie Egan. He's Jim Browder. You're listening to BPR and GBH and NEPM, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Central Square Theater with The Moderate, an inside look at the experience of content moderators by Drama Desk-winning playwright Ken Urban. Through March 1st, centralsquaretheater.org. And GM Roth Design Remodeling, providing custom kitchens, bathrooms, and accessory dwelling units. Their design team works to create living-in-place solutions tailored to the needs of each home and family. More information at gmroth.com. And Explo, from culinary arts to veterinary science, Explo's summer program helps middle schoolers to find their spark. Day and overnight options at explo.org/summer. Priority deadline February 13th. And Dover Rug and Home, rugs and carpeting for today's lifestyle with in-home rug trial and design consultation. Dover Rug in Natick, Boston, Burlington, and online at doverrug.com. Dover Rug, rugs and the people who know them.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browder, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Mayor Wu joins us in about 18 minutes for an hour of Ask the Mayor. She'll be here in person. Joined now on Zoom by CNN's chief national correspondent, John King, behind the great reporting project all over the map. Last night, I saw him in Raymondville, Texas. Are you still there, John?
Brownsville, Texas, this morning. Happy Tuesday.
And to you, of course.
So I know that Raymondville, because I saw you too last night, big Trump place, big Latino population. I don't know if we know anything yet about what people there think now, but what are you doing and what are you finding out to date?
So this is Texas 34. It's one of the big battleground districts in the midterm elections. It's one of only 13 districts in the United States that Trump actually carried in 2024, but is represented by a Democrat. Ticket splitting is so rare. It used to be common when I started doing this, but you have voters who are voting Trump for president and Vicente Gonzalez in this district for Congress. This is one of the places Republicans targeted. When Texas redid its redistricting, Trump won here by about 6 points in 2024. They redrew the lines. If the lines for 2026 now, the new Texas redistricting, if those lines were in place in 2024, Trump would have won this district by about 10 points. You know why they did that. They tried to create some new, more Republican districts because they know they're going to lose elsewhere, and they're trying to protect their House majority, which is tiny, 2 votes, by picking up some of these districts. More than 70% of the voters, more than 80% of the people who live here are Latino. More than 70% of the voters will be Latino come election day. And this is one of the big battleground districts in the country. So I'm here for the, number one, how's the economy? Number two, have costs gone down? And number three, how do people here feel? The border is right there. I can walk to the border from where I am right now. How do they feel about the ICE enforcement? And I was just talking to a small businesswoman who says that they've installed a bunch of license plate readers around town. So when cars are driving through, they can track your license plate. A lot of Latinos here say they're all for border security. They're all for a stricter immigration system that keeps illegal people from coming across. But as we've heard in other places, they just see that it's over the top, over aggressive. And this small businesswoman just started tearing up. She's a dual citizen, but she's been an American citizen for years. And she says her children have to carry their passports to school because they're afraid.
How do they feel about Bad Bunny and Trump's response?
So I asked that question, and she said she was crying during the halftime show. She said Bad Bunny's so well represented. Now, Bad Bunny, Puerto Rican. Here's a young 32-year-old small businesswoman, started a palateria. It's an ice cream shop. A bold, an entrepreneur taking a risk, started it right before the COVID pandemic. This is their family life savings. This is someone who's trying. A Mexican-American watched a Puerto Rican, and she just said she was in tears because he so well represented the culture. I'm just outside the shop right now. If you remember the halftime show, some of those push carts,
Sure.
Yes.
They have them in the cart here. They bring them to local schools. And they help students raise money for fundraisers selling these ice creams. And so she was in tears because she said it just represented the joy of all, and this is the word that I think is critical here, Americans. She's an American citizen who's afraid in her own community.
One last thing. I want to make sure I got the numbers right when I was watching you last night, John, from Raymondville. Did you say that Latino votes statewide in Texas? In 2016, Trump got 34%, 2020, 41%, and last year he got 55% of the vote in Texas?
55% of the Latino vote here in Texas in the exit polls in 2024, and about 46% nationally. Trump's numbers have gone up in all three elections. And so this is one of the defining questions in the midterm elections now. Does Trump, through you've seen the polling data, you don't need me to tell you, the American people, including Latino Americans, but all Americans, especially independents and non-Trump Republicans who vote for Trump but who don't love Trump, the polling numbers have changed a lot because of the policy, what they just view as over-aggressive police state enforcement in Minneapolis. And then you do something personal like insulting Bad Bunny, saying, again, Jim, when you're in these communities, they're 70, 80, sometimes 90% Latino. They're all bilingual families. Some of them go to see relatives in Mexico for lunch or dinner and then come back to their communities. They're speaking English, then Spanish, and English, then Spanish. They make jokes about Spanglish. When Trump puts on his Truth Social post, nobody understands what he's saying. They cringe because this is their life. It's always been their life. It's always been their life. And they just think the way they put it, I'm not going to articulate it right because you have to see their faces when people talk about it, is that their president, the president of the United States, the president of the country they love, and the president of the country they are contributing to the economy, they're sending their kids to school, disrespects them, insults them.
John, speaking of midterm elections, I have one last thing that's a few states over. We talk. I'm not sure if we talked to you, but I know we talked in the show when this guy Taylor Remmett, or whatever the hell his name was, the state senator who won the Republican district state senate race in Texas, got a lot of play. Yesterday, in a state rep race in Louisiana, a woman, Chastity Martinez, won a district that Trump had carried just a year ago by 13 points, and she won by 24, a 37-point swing in essentially a year. How much should we make of something like that on the heels of the Texas race?
A boatload. You should make a lot of it because it's not a one-up. You have that Texas race outside, that's Fort Worth. That was Latino voters. Not just Latino voters, independents as well, but a huge swing among Latino voters. You have the Louisiana example. So two ruby red states that Trump carried big time, way in the South, right? But you also have, look what happened in 2025, whether we're talking about Virginia or New Jersey or Pennsylvania or Michigan or Wisconsin or Mississippi. Democrats have been overperforming everywhere in 2025 and 2026 so far. Now it's only February. There's no guarantee that carries over. to November. The Democrats have their own identity issues, and we'll watch them play out in primaries as we go through the cycle. But in a midterm election campaign, I've been doing this a long time, as I always say, 40 years now, always. There's some small massaging. George W. Bush, in the midterm election, the first one right after 9/11, the Republicans actually gained seats. But midterm elections are about the president's performance. The president's numbers right now are tanking, which is why Republicans are in a panic. When you're losing races in Texas, and you can sort of rationalize or spin off, oh, we lost in New Jersey, oh, we lost in Virginia, that's a bluish purple state. When you're losing in Mississippi and Georgia and Louisiana and Texas, and the swing is, like you say, 17 points, 20 points, sometimes 30 points, they're afraid to say it publicly because they know what Trump does to them, but Republicans are in a panic right now.
Talking to John King from Brownsville, Texas.
So what's the story with the government shutdown possibility? What do you think?
I was just looking before I dialed in. John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, Republican, says they are making some forward progress. But Speaker Johnson says he still thinks the Democrats are being unreasonable in their demands. There's no question, to all of the conversation we've had so far, because of that political environment, Democrats feel very emboldened to stand by that they want body cameras. They want other restrictions on how ICE can operate. And they want them in writing. The Customs and Border Patrol chief and the ICE chief are testifying right now up on Capitol Hill, and they're being asked these questions. How many have body cameras? How many have been fired for misconduct? What are you going to do to make sure what we saw with Renee Good and Alex Preddy doesn't happen again? But the Democrats want legislative language in writing. And even the Democrats will tell you they've had some progress, both with Republicans on the Hill and in their conversations with White House officials. They say they're making some progress, but when they ask to put it in writing, they're having difficulty. So I think it's a good thing. The bipartisan negotiations underway. I think it's a positive thing that people say they're still talking and they're making progress. I'm just going to be a skeptic because this issue is so polarizing and so hard to resolve that until we see a written deal and they say they're ready to bring it to the floor, I would, so how long is it going to take is my question. Do they make the deadline? There are people in Washington who say maybe, but I'm skeptical.
Yeah.
John, I probably should know this, but the whole thing that got this going was Trump, correct me if I'm wrong, signaling that he was open to dealing with some of these issues. Was that like a rhetorical, I'm open to discussing some constraints, or was it as specific as a mask, a body camera, a warrant? How specific was his commitment?
He has not publicly laid out some of the specifics. Some of his team has says they're willing to talk about the body cameras. I do know from talking to some people in Congress yesterday that they were making some progress on the body cameras, and they're trying to deploy more of them even before they get a deal. Because this tells you, so let's see if they can get there in the specifics. The president's team is negotiating. But Jim, just the fact that he's willing to do this. They withdrew 700 people from Minneapolis. They're drawing down forces on the ground. This president of the United States, he'll never publicly say it this way, but he is in retreat. And that's a big deal. That's a rare deal. He's in retreat on one of his, if not his, signature issue. He won an election on economic and immigration promises, and trust me, in my travels, even people who like him and even people who still support him say, on the economy, it's not getting as good. Costs are not coming down as fast as he promised. Jobs are not coming back as fast as he promised. And on immigration, even a lot of Trump supporters say this is really hard to watch. He should dial it back.
Speaking of jobs coming back, I don't know what the political thinking is of shutting down that huge tunnel in New York City where more than 1,000 people have really good jobs. Supposedly because Schumer won't get named the tunnel after Trump, or shutting down this bridge up in Canada, which is going to end up hurting transit into the United States too. I mean, what is the point of taking away people's jobs, especially in the construction fields and the trades? It just makes, why is he doing this?
I love you, Marjorie, because you asked the impossible. You're asking me to apply logic to Donald J. Trump.
Yeah.
And look. Bad Bunny was the worst ever. Nobody understands what he's saying. We're going to shut down the Gordie Howe Bridge. We're going to. This is why Republicans are apoplectic right now. Trump starts his own fires. He makes his own crises, and then he goes and buys some kerosene, and he just stands there and pours it on them.
Yeah, but
And
they stick with him. They stuck with him basically through the racist thing of the Obamas, too.
Bill, add that to the list. I didn't mention that. That's another thing. They just think about, if you are, Jim Jordan or Mike Johnson, and you're going home to an 80% or 70% Republican district, you don't have to criticize this because you're going to win anyway. It's the people who actually have competitive elections, but they're all. I wish I could get out of the car and walk around this district. There are primaries in these places.
Right.
And so the candidates who are endorsed by Trump have on their signs Trump endorsed, because they know that helps them in the primary. These other Republicans, even though they're in a panic right now, they're just afraid to speak out because he'll either primary them or bully them or get people to cut off their money. And so it's a huge problem because the Republicans need to get distance from him, but most of them are petrified to do it because they think they don't get to the November ballot if they do. So I think we'll be having different conversations. If the president's numbers and the country's mood stay anywhere close to where they are right now, this is going to be a horrible year for Republicans. And so my question is, when we get through the primaries, the primary here in this district is in March, right? So March, April, May, you have a lot of primaries, but some states go as late as June, and there are some even as late as September. And so that's sort of the straitjacket on a lot of these Republicans right now. They're afraid to speak out because of their own survival.
John, before you go, the last few minutes, one of the latest in an endless series of wrong predictions by me, I feared that the Epstein thing, because of whatever came up the last few weeks, because it would be backburnered and it would be forgotten about because of the most recent Trump atrocity. But you got to give it, people like Massey, the Republican from Kentucky, Khanna, the Democrat who sponsored that Epstein transparency thing that became law, they, among others, went and saw some of the documents yesterday. They said there were some names that were redacted that never should have been. Some names continue to be redacted, even though they were supposed to see the unredacted. There's still 3 million documents that the Justice Department will not even release. This thing, I know it's only, February, but with the continued resistance and obfuscation by Trump and his people, this has potential to continue to be a midterm election issue, no?
Yes, absolutely. And you're seeing the wheels turn much more quickly overseas. This is a threat to the UK Prime Minister right now because he appointed somebody to an ambassador's job who was in the Epstein files. They just split the
and he knew about
royal family of Norway because they have issues in these files. In Trump's case, there are some new documents that in some ways are favorable to the president, where he says that everybody knew this about Jeffrey Epstein, stay away from him, and yet he says he didn't know. In these documents, Trump is saying everybody knew about it way before, and now he's, to this day, has said he didn't know about the specifics. And so there are some more questions for Trump to answer. On the one hand, it's a good thing. He says this guy was a creep. But on the other hand, that if the document's correct, then he has not been telling the truth when he says he had no idea what was actually happening. He says everybody knew. And so, yes, Jim, this thing, a lot of people, I think, thought the shelf life or other things would overconsume it. But you got to give Massey and Khanna credit, whether you like them politically or not, is they also had some grace here and said they're going to give the Justice Department a little time to see if it realizes it made a mistake before they go out and use their authority to publish the name. So two very different guys who have been very principled on this issue, and I think are both carrying themselves with sort of a methodical, decent, respectful approach, but they're saying they will not back down, which guarantees this carries on.
Yeah, I also left out one critical factor. It's not just the obfuscation and the avoidance by the Trump people and the leadership by Khanna and Massey. The women have been relentless. And by the way, CNN has done wonderful work bringing them on again and again, and their lawyers on it again. The courage they continue to show helps keep this afloat, which I think is good for people who believe in accountability, which is most people I know.
I'm with you 10,000%, because you know that every time they have to discuss this, they know it's causing themselves pain and it's causing someone else pain, and yet they think it's so important they're willing.
Super Bowl you've ever seen?
It was painful. The Bears game way back in the day,
right.
At 85, was pretty tough. Let's hope it was a learning experience. As I said before, it was a surprise we were there. That was ugly. It hurt.
It did indeed. John, it's good to see you. Good luck in Texas. We're dying to see your reporting.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, John King.
Thank you.
We speak with CNN's Chief National Correspondent John King behind the Great Reporting Project all over the map. He's now in Texas. We say goodbye to those of you listening on NEPM. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure to tune in as well to the fabulous 413. They start at 3 o'clock this afternoon. We're going to keep going here in Boston. After this quick break, the mayor of the city of Boston, Michelle Wu, is going to join us for the rest of the show from noon to 1, taking our questions and yours, 877-301-8970. She is here at the Boston Public Library. I'm Marjorie Egan. He's Jim Browdy. You listen to BPR and GBH and NEPM live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
At our next Beyond the Page event, we'll be featuring best-selling author Kate Quinn. Bring your questions and join us on Tuesday, February 17th. Learn more and reserve your ticket today at gbh.org/events.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Explore New England. This original documentary film series explores the region's great outdoors through a variety of activities, including camping, biking, paddling, and skiing. Available on YouTube and Roku or explorenewengland.tv. And Safety Insurance, offering auto insurance policies designed to help for when the worst happens. You can ask an independent agent about safety insurance. Safety Insurance will help you manage life's storms. And Fixed Dental, offering permanent teeth-on implants customized in their laboratory, enabling their doctors and technicians to oversee every aspect of the smile design. Learn more about all the treatments offered at Fixed at fixeddental.com. And Rockland Trust Bank, committed to helping individuals and local businesses work towards their financial goals by providing financial advice and resources. More at rocklandtrust.com. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. Joined now live at the library by Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. Mayor Wu is here for the hour for February's edition of Ask the Mayor. If you have a question for her, you can call her or text her at 877-301-8970, or come find our colleagues Zoe and Ronan will be there, I think, in a minute. And ask a question of the mayor in person. Mayor Wu, it's good to see you.
Great to be here. Great to see you both.
Hello,
and
Mayor,
everyone here.
Mayor Wu. So we'll start with the question that kind of surrounds being the mayor of Boston every time there's a snowstorm. How is the snow removal doing? We're getting some complaints, particularly from cyclists, upset that bike lanes weren't cleared in Alston and Brighton, and they Boston Cyclists Union had to shovel bike lanes along Commonwealth Avenue. Some other people are complaining about side streets, snow on the sidewalks, etc. So how you doing?
Yeah, it's been a little while since we've had one like this, and I'm told that this we've had actually a couple little ones since then too, but the big one that came that dropped 23 inches in 24 hours was the 8th biggest snowstorm that Boston has ever seen.
I didn't know that.
But the interesting thing, or I guess the impactful thing here, is that the temperatures have stayed so low since then. We have not had a melting day from 2 weeks ago until now. And so unlike recent years where the temperature's been dipping up and down and Mother Nature helps us get rid of the snow a bit, this one has stuck, and we may be getting more snow tonight again as well. So our priorities are always, we got to get major thoroughfares cleared so that emergency vehicles, general traffic can go about the city, and get schools back open, make sure the buses can round the corners, and that students will be safe when they're walking to school or taking the T, etc. And then after that, doing the work of digging through the intersections, getting at crosswalks, removing that snow, taking it to a snow farm, melting down the snow farm if need be, if we need more capacity. And Boston has a kind of maybe inefficient way, I will say, complicated way of doing things, where the city is technically only responsible and legally supposed to be doing snow on roadways and the sidewalks in front of city buildings. Everywhere else, the sidewalks are the legal responsibility and ownership of, or the responsibility to clear the snow falls to the property owner of that building, whether it's a residential home, a business, a nonprofit organization, all the way to the crosswalk. And of course, it's no good to the mom in a stroller if 3 of the houses on the street have cleared their sidewalk and then one in the middle hasn't. So we are actively talking through ways that we can think about how to do this better, whether it is reviving some efforts around volunteers and coordinating different efforts in the past. When I was on the city council, there was a Snow Angels program, and there was a Kids Dig Out Fire Hydrants for ice cream gift cards program. And now we're at the point where we know where the most trafficked sidewalks are, right, in front of schools, in front of senior buildings, et cetera. What could we do to potentially level up on the city resources and the budget that would be affiliated with that, but then maybe charge back those who are responsible if they haven't done their part. We've issued many violations so far, but none of that matters. Tickets for folks who have not shoveled on their property, but none of that matters if it feels like you're stuck and you can't get around the city.
Is there such a thing as heated sidewalks anywhere in the world? Is that a myth or?
I'm not familiar.
Okay.
I don't think they're coming soon.
Okay,
I'm sure there's technology that someone has worked on, but
I think you're the
this
mayor
is
to
all
do
a matter of budget too, right? Just people have asked me, why don't we have a big snow melter that we bring out and drive down the street and just kind of dump the snow in and get rid of, disappear it as it goes. The cost of one of those industrial melters, for the frequency that we have it, the speed that it's used, everything's a balance of how we manage our resources day to day, and we're really trying to focus on getting better at the crosswalks, the bike lanes, the side streets, all of those things that require smaller work.
Where is the city farm for all the dumping of the snow? It used to be in the seaport, but I don't know if there's
There
room
are
for it.
many of them.
Many,
Yeah, I think
all
we're
around.
up to 7 or 9 or so.
Okay.
And so there's one in Franklin Park, one in the Seaport, one over in Mattapan, and we try to have one in each region of the city.
Remember when it didn't melt until July? When
I
we
do
had
indeed.
The year 2015.
Number is 877-301-8970. You issued an executive order, or maybe executive orders plural, when you had a thing the other day about ICE's potential presence in the city with a bunch of leaders from Cambridge and other surrounding communities. Could you briefly tell us what the content was, and what does the city do if ICE chooses to violate any of the edicts that you put out?
The executive order that I signed and that we coordinated, and was very proud to be a Greater Boston region resident that day and every day. I signed it alongside 6 other mayors or town managers of their communities. And so it was Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, Brookline, Lynn, Newton, and Chelsea, all standing together, all moving forward effectively the same kinds of protections. And we were very clear, this is about what we can control as a city, despite what others might choose to do, and reiterating our community's intention to follow the law and to uphold the law, no matter who that accountability might apply to. And so these orders to protect against violent and unconstitutional federal operations really reiterate what the role of our police departments and the role of our city agencies are, which is to make sure that everybody is safe, to do so through de-escalation, to do so through showing up when residents are in need and rendering medical aid right away, should it ever come to that situation. And to remind everyone that, for example, if someone were to try to enter your home without a warrant, whether or not they are describing themselves as a federal immigration official, you should call 911. And in that case, our police officers are prepared to respond, to use their training in de-escalation to de-escalate that situation, to verify what information may or may not be true, because we're now in a world where so many acts are being committed that are against the law that it's hard to even understand whether someone is who they even say they are. And so worries about impersonation of different agencies or different levels of types of officials, and then of course the behavior itself, whether or not it's coming from someone who is technically affiliated with the government.
So what if an ICE agent goes on property that you said they cannot go on? Does a Boston cop arrest that ICE agent?
Oh, right, that's another provision.
Yeah.
So we all signed, similar to what the governor has done as well, alongside the Black and Latino Legislative Caucus, that state property and now city property will not be used for staging purposes for immigration enforcement. And that includes properties like libraries, community centers, schools, where they are public buildings, but they are public for a stated purpose and not for other purposes that will not happen inside. Now, this is not to provoke conflict between multiple armed officers of different levels of government. We are being clear what the rules are and what our decision to use public property will be. Should the federal government choose, for example, to violate that law, violate these orders, we are not asking or requiring or encouraging our officers to enter into any kind of conflict, but we will be there to document the violations of laws happening, to record with body-worn cameras, to use official police reports, to release all of that information, to be there in numbers with whatever technology we have to document any violations for future legal accountability also when that reckoning does come.
One last related thing, and then we're going to get to your calls and texts, we promise, at 877-301-8970. I was sort of surprised when a California federal court yesterday ruled on the California legislation that banned masks on federal law enforcement people. I assumed that the finding was going to be this is a federal province, you can't mess with them. In fact, what the judge appeared to say, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the problem with the laws didn't apply to state and local people equally. And she seemed to be saying if every law enforcement, federal, state, local, could not wear a mask, she would have ruled it to be constitutionally permissible. If that's the case, would you include that and put something, I don't know if you had to put it before the city council, that would ban the wearing of masks by these federal?
Own law enforcement agencies feel very strongly that when actions are taking place that seem designed to intimidate and destroy trust in institutions and in government, it affects all of us and it makes all of us less safe. And so there is a state bill that has filed for that in Massachusetts. And at least for now, many of the lower courts all across the country are standing strong on holding the line for our Constitution and the ability for local governments, for state and local communities to be in charge of public safety as the Constitution and our form of government has delegated down to us. Unfortunately, you know, a lot of these are getting appealed up. We will see what happens. But every day that there is a bit of room or delay or some action that gives a little bit more space from the lower courts, that makes a difference too.
Well, you could do it in the city rather than waiting for the state. Is it something you'd entertain as a possibility?
We will look into it. I mean, we have been talking about a lot of this, and a lot of this is coordination with other communities, wanting to make sure we're not confusing things that apply across the region and coordinate with state action rather than jumping it. But this is something that we have very clearly stated is important and cuts against public safety.
You know, just one more ICE thing. Tom Homan, who's now running it in place of that Bavino guy who's been kind of pushed to the side, has said that if he could get cooperation from prisons, we don't have any state prisons in Boston, but we do have the Suffolk County lockup. And his argument is that if they could go into a place like a prison or a jail where someone is getting out after having served their time for whatever crime they committed, why can't the people in the prisons and the jails cooperate with that? And that would avoid his having to do so many apprehensions on the street. What do you say to that? Do you think that's legitimate or not?
Our, when we're enforcing public safety, it's important to have clear parameters and to have not to rely on having to make specific distinctions based on specific situations. And the distinction that the parameters that we have set as a city with our Trust Act, and many across the region as well with whether it's called the Trust Act or Welcoming City Ordinance, is that when there is a criminal warrant, our officers enforce that no matter where the warrant is coming from. When a judge has decided there's probable cause, there's the judicial system has weighed in, whether that is from the federal government, whether that is from another state government outside of Massachusetts, whether it's from abroad, we honor those and work to make sure that those are valid and real. But when there is not a criminal warrant, when it is a civil immigration situation, the city of Boston does not participate because we will not allow our resources to be pulled in that direction.
Tyler.
877-301-8970.
Tyler in Dorchester, you're first with Mayor Wu. Welcome to the show, Tyler. Hi.
Hey, how's it going, Mayor Wu and Jim and Marjorie? I'm calling because I'm a bus driver for the T, and one of the biggest obstacles at my job is people who double park on a road where there's only one lane of traffic in each direction. And every now and then I'll see, a cop pull up and talk to them.
You're getting applause, Tyler. I want you to know. Go ahead.
Very rarely I'll see them get a ticket. So anyways, my ask is, would you be willing to look into increased enforcement for people who double park, especially along bus routes and especially on those roads that are only one lane going in either direction? Because it really does just slow everything down so much trying to get that bus around those people.
Thanks, Tyler, for what you do every day. If you can stay on, I'd love to hear where specifically you are seeing that happen. Every time you get slowed down in a bus, everyone else gets slowed down also, and so there's a ripple effect everywhere. I think, as you might guess, we can't be at every road every day, and therefore enforcement through ticketing only goes so far. It is important because you want to deter that kind of behavior, and hopefully if someone gets one ticket, they won't try that again, at least for a little bit. But the real solution here is one that is in the works, and hopefully will speed up a little bit, which is state legislation that was passed that now finally allows for cameras to be installed on vehicles like yours and school buses as well, to catch the license plates of those who are blocking those lanes. And so that will then become automatic, and there will be no need for someone to rush over or be right there to be able to catch that behavior. Once we have those installed and going, we're working on it on the BPS side for our school buses, and I think the MBTA is working on it for those buses now that the legislation has passed. That is hopefully going to make your life a lot easier, and then all of your riders and all of our commuters.
Tyler, thank you for the call. Stay on hold, and one of our producers will give your contact info to the mayor.
We have a text from Elizabeth in West Roxbury who says, I've been a resident of Boston for 30 years, a homeowner for 18. My property taxes have doubled in 4 years, 13% increase this year, 10% last year. Senator Nick Collins says the Wu administration has increased the budget 26% in 4 years and added 300 positions. Now the cost for White Stadium have almost tripled. I think it's not tripled, but I think is it tripled? Anyway, I cannot afford this. This is the most fiscally irresponsible administration in recent history. That's Elizabeth in West Roxbury.
The property taxes are unacceptable. How fast they've been going up and how much of a shock it's been year after year to have double-digit increases. That is why we filed legislation that has worked in Boston before, that evens out things in a way to protect residents, because cities in Massachusetts, unlike other places around the country, cannot set our own tax rates. It's actually not true what you have been hearing, that the reason why taxes are going up is because we're trying to find additional money. Our taxes are set by very rigid state law, and that means they're capped at 2.5% increase on property taxes unless there's new growth, but that new development actually increases the need for taxes anyway because it creates more buildings that then need more city services and other things like that. So this 2.5% cap has really been affecting towns everywhere. Healthcare costs have been going up by double digits. That has been blowing a hole in the budgets of towns throughout the Commonwealth. But what has been driving this increase for residents here is actually that the corporations, commercial property owners, have been getting a huge tax break over the last few years. We have been seeing commercial tax rates go down. And so 10 years ago, 15 years ago, commercial properties made up about 2/3 of the tax burden in Boston, and residents were the other third. Then it was closer to 55-45. Now we're much closer to almost moving towards an even split there, because there's been such a change in office markets. But the way for that to be absorbed back into the system should not be for residents to make up all of the tax break that corporations and their commercial property owners are getting. It should be to even it out so that they get a slightly smaller tax break and residents do not have to have a huge tax spike. So we are not being driven by a growing budget for how the taxes are allocated. That is state law, and we've been trying to get the flexibility to change that. Those 300 positions also, I want to make very clear, we added positions after the pandemic when many things were just sort of put to the side administratively while the city was all hands on deck trying to save lives and take care of everyone. But what we realized was that so many positions had either gone empty or the work was being contracted out at very expensive hourly rates. So we saw this in our tech department, right? Building the website up or maintaining different online registration things. We would have online contractors working on those tasks for very expensive hourly rates that now we can do in-house for much cheaper and get it done faster. Similarly, some of the building maintenance, we were contracting out plumbing or other kinds of specific needs for facilities maintenance. Again, much more expensive than just hiring someone to do that in-house. They can manage all of the buildings that the city has, and that has ended up not only saving money, but allowing us to be able to get to those building repairs much faster than if we had to be on a timeline to put out a contract to bid, et cetera. So some of those things are kind of cherry-picked together. We obviously need relief on housing costs, and property taxes are a huge piece of that in Massachusetts. So we're going to keep pushing, and we've also been fighting to just fill up these office buildings so we get commercial properties filled up, get their values back up so that that burden will stop being carried by residents.
You know, one of the things Elizabeth said in her text was the tripling of the cost for White Stadium. You announced on Friday that the figure for the city, which you said is the final one for reasons you can explain, is 135, which is almost triple. The initial was 50 for the city, then it went to 90, and then to 135. If you knew when you proposed this that the final city commitment, as you say, was going to be 135, would you have done it?
Yes. And I want to clarify, because the way city governments and public sector agencies in Massachusetts have to build buildings is also very different. And so it kind of feels sometimes flipped a little bit, where you might expect that if you want to build something, you name the price and then you do the work for that price, right? We are subject to state bidding laws that require us to break down what we're trying to build and then into each component of what's needed to build that. And then all of those items are bid out, and the market comes back and we take the lowest qualified bid that actually matches what the needs are. And that is what builds the final budget for any project. So we always go through this phase where there's a placeholder amount in the budget, which is the capital budget, which is a 5-year look ahead, lots of moving pieces. That first chunk is never intended to be fully representative of where the project will go. It's meant to kind of reserve a place in the pipeline for design and development. After that early kind of chunk in the capital budget is held aside just as a placeholder. Then it moves into real design, going out to the community and asking, what do you want to see if we were to do a renovation, for example, of the city's home for BPS student athletes? And what we usually hear is, well, we don't like the building to look like that. We also have needed this for a long time, and things get added to a project, and we have to decide, do we expand the scope of it, or do we not do that and put that aside, even though these projects can be kind of once-in-a-generation investments. And so between that early placeholder, then an early estimate, to now, yes, there have been lots of escalations in things that are outside the city's control, like steel prices going up 40% from when we started, or labor costs going up very significantly. A lot of things from federal policies and all of the chaos that's been caused by this administration. But that doesn't explain all or even most of the change in the numbers. Most of the change is because we went out to the community, We heard from over 100 public meetings and conversations what people's needs and dreams and hopes were. And we decided to expand the project to do it right, to have the design not be a boxy building that might block some of the very special views in Franklin Park, but to have separate, smaller, slimmer buildings with space for storage for equipment, with a community kitchen for the first time, with a banquet hall, with public restrooms for the first time that could be available throughout the year, with not just the ability to have a grass field that the soccer team would use as our tenant on this, but one that we could stretch every bit of playing time on by installing a sub-air system that adds cost to it, but then can greatly stretch the value that we get from it. And so as the project evolved, we decided to do this right and to go in on my belief that our Boston kids deserve nothing less than the best. This is a once in 70-year investment. We have been trying to renovate White Stadium as a community for at least 40 years, when 4 or 5 different mayoral administration efforts under different mayoral administrations have been proposed and then fell apart because the financing was too hard to get done amidst a lot of competing needs. We now have a partner in place with the Boston Legacy Football Club, the professional women's soccer team, where we are paying 40% of the construction cost, and they are delivering the largest community benefits package in the city's history of $252 million, over 15 years of private money invested that our $135 million unlocks.
By the way, one related note to what Elizabeth in West Roxbury said, she got some of her data, she said, from Senator Nick Collins, who, as we've discussed, was one of the people who blocked some of your legislative efforts up there. Nick Collins requested to be on the show. We said, we'd love to have you. He canceled subsequently, not we. We would be happy to have him here. Before we take a break, Mayor, you mentioned your effort on Beacon Hill in terms of the property tax issue. There's going to be, we discussed this with you before, there's likely a question on the ballot that would mandate not local option, but statewide rent control with a pretty tight cap. We asked you about it in November. You said, I'll probably stay out of it, even though obviously you're a supporter of rent stabilization as a concept. Yours was was a local option proposal. The legislature didn't treat. The governor said she's a no on it, she told us. There have been efforts in Massachusetts history. I did one 25 years ago. The people with the minimum wage did it maybe 10 years ago, where the pressure of a ballot question sort of looming over the state has provided leverage to get a compromise at the legislature. A lot of people think now is a good time for a compromise on some rent control bill using the ballot question as leverage. Do you agree with that? And are you part of any effort to try to get legislators to try to do something in the middle?
Yeah, so I have finally taken some time to really dig into the details of the ballot question and what the legislative language is, as well as what the organizing efforts are. If this is still on the ballot by this fall, I am a yes voting for it. It's not perfect. And it's not what the city of Boston put forward as a balanced proposal for our city that was based on a ton of research and stakeholders representing all parts of different views and interests that would really preserve housing production while protecting against egregious rent increases. So this is different from that, but I'm not going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good in this case when there is so much urgency and pressure from housing costs on our residents, and every other avenue that we are going down, whether it's a very reasonable transfer fee on sales of properties over $2 million at the point when the sale happens, when the funds are there for a small transaction that would have delivered tens of millions of dollars specifically targeted for affordable housing that we have put up 3, 4, multiple times to the State House that hasn't gone anywhere, or our past home rule petition on rent stabilization and rent control, or property taxes. Something's got to give, and there's always a better solution that comes out of legislating and being able to pass something with nuance than the kind of hammer of a ballot initiative. But we need to see something happen. And I hope there can be some compromise worked out, because every city's condition is actually quite different from each other. But we need to see some action, and so I will be voting for it if it's there.
That's the voice of Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. Will be right back. She'll be with us till the top of the hour. You're listening to Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan Ask the Mayor on BPR 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, museum layoffs and financial strain are forcing cultural institutions nationwide to scale back. Now the Museum of Fine Arts is making cuts of its own. Pierre Turjanian, the MFA's director, joins us, plus filmmaker and novelist John Sayles on his new book, Crucible, a sweeping story set in Henry Ford's orbit, from factory floors and union fights to Ford's ill-fated Amazon rubber venture. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Concord Park, a Volunteers of America senior community in Concord, offering wellness care and support services. Compass Memory Support Neighborhood, concordpark.org/care. And Mass General Brigham. In heart surgery, expertise matters. Mass General Brigham Heart and Vascular Institute performs thousands of surgeries each year and is committed to research and innovation. massgeneralbrigham.org/heart.
On All Things Considered, you get the big stories.
What are you hearing from sources inside the agency?
The pressing questions.
Congressman, how do you respond to that?
And moments of joy to keep you going.
It took me a few days. I perfected it.
Really? Can I hear that? End your day on a high note with All Things Considered from NPR News.
This afternoon at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Welcome back to BPR. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We continue our discussion with the mayor of the city of Boston, Michelle Wu. By the way, we are overwhelmed, this is typical for our listeners, with texts about heated sidewalks, Mayor. Marilyn Randolph says Christian Science Plaza. Anonymous says Summit, BC.
Hold on.
What?
She said that ones at Christian, they had them for snow melting, but they don't work and they're no longer used.
Okay, whatever. Linda from Clinton says Lake Placid, Japan.
Lake
so there are a
Placid,
few.
okay.
And you want to make an update on the number of snow farms, correct?
Yes, I would like to correct the record because my amazing team, has been wanting to make sure we have this right. There are 13 snow farms across the city of Boston. And I neglected to say, and really should always start with this, the team that does this work is absolutely amazing. We were at Frontage Road right before the cold snap and the snow that happened on Saturday. We were there on Friday just to say thank you, because there are 500 city employees and contractors who have been working nonstop for a month now. They are there 24 hours a day. The rest of us could be signing executive orders or writing a letter or sending off a tweet or something like that. But it is the team members who are out there, and they really have been going above and beyond. Again, getting through all of the city snow time and time again, and then pitching in whenever someone identifies a situation that may not actually be the city's responsibility, whether it's the MBTA, one of their bus stops, or a sidewalk that is still critical. They've been going and diving in on that too. So I just want to say thank you to all of our city workers.
You know, speaking of the snow and the cold, Shirley Young covered a tragic story of a man who apparently did not want to go to a shelter, was outside a South Station, but there was this sort of gentleman's agreement between the governor and the people that run South Station to let people in when the weather becomes extreme below 32 degrees. Apparently that stopped. I know it's not you, it's the state, but is there something that you could do about this? Because South Station obviously is in the city of Boston.
I know our teams have been in constant touch about this issue, and we have the best of the best working for the city for some time now. I am, we every year go out and do a census of on-street homelessness. On a winter night at midnight, we head out, and Jim Green, who has led the city's efforts on this for many, many years, was on his, I think it was his 39th annual census, and he knows everyone, has been working at this and has been able to share the places where we have seen a big improvement, right? Many of the places where we used to find people, as I was out with the team, we didn't see anyone at all. And that's been a function of more shelter capacity, better mobile outreach. There were vans going around, and that happens all throughout the year, but especially before a storm or during a cold snap. All of our organizations come together, and many of the usual rules and requirements are relaxed as well, just to encourage everyone to get inside as quickly as possible.
So you would approve, this man froze to death, is right outside South Station, so you would be fine with people allowed into South Station for the overnight period when the cold gets too
It should never happen anywhere,
Okay.
but especially in the city of Boston, that someone has to struggle to be somewhere warm at night. And we do everything we can to make that happen. And there have to be multiple options and pathways for people to do so, feeling comfortable, feeling safe, feeling like they're doing so with dignity as well. And that's what we're always working towards.
I know Marjorie said it's a state issue, a T issue, et cetera, as Shirley said in her piece. Have you made any efforts around this most recent locking of doors? Have you made calls?
I know Jim and our chief of housing, Sheila Dillon, are in constant conversation with the T and with the state.
Deborah in Brighton, you're on with Mayor Wu. Hello.
Yes, good morning. I'd like to feel blessed to have all three of you in my life. I'm proudest to have you as the mayor, Mayor Wu. I want to talk to you about something that has been plaguing me for years, and that has to do with the amount of road salt that is placed on our roads after you just paid high compliments. It's really hard for me to talk about this because of those hard workers. However, if you consider the amount of salt that's being put on our roads, especially in flat areas, it is, I've read...
Hey, Deborah, can I interrupt you? Your connection is so
horrible,
bad.
yeah.
If you could just state your question so we don't lose you.
Yeah.
So, what's the question?
Just very briefly, though, road salt, affects infrastructure, metal, concrete. It affects aquatic organisms. I'm wondering, can we get some kind of training to our Department of Public Works people that really views the situation and is not constantly putting down salt on top of salt on top of salt?
Got it. Yeah. You got it, Deborah. Let's hear what the mayor has to say in response. Thank you for your call. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Deborah. Thanks for your kind words. And you're right that this is definitely a trade-off. Our responsibility at the city, always first and foremost, is safety. That is safety in every season, and in winter, salt is definitely a part of that, because we want, wherever possible, the roads to be able to get to pavement. And when you pre-treat with salt, it does make a big, big difference in, you could take a certain amount of snow and it won't accumulate on those roadways, and then we don't have to worry about slipping, sliding cars into snowbanks and or worse. And so, but you're absolutely right that it does have other impacts as well in terms of our ecosystem and nature and some of the materials and other infrastructure that's affected by that. We do have other kinds of salt that is used, for example, in the public garden and in parks, that is specifically designed to be able to raise the melting point of snow, but not harm wildlife and vegetation in that same way. So, it's not as effective always, and there's always trade-offs that come with it, but we are exploring ways that we can achieve a better balance there.
Deborah, thank you much for your call. We appreciate it.
Here's a good text, Madam Mayor. I'm a young person in Boston, desperate for a better nightlife. It's so expensive to go out here, much like everything else in the city. I know this might be at the state level, but is there any chance of Boston legalizing happy hours anytime before I am 30? I am a 23-year-old who needs a cheap drink.
I am all for that. Believe me. It's actually not it's not a small issue. It's not a light sort of trivial thing. this is a real economic driver for young people and for others who are making decisions about where to make their lives and where they feel welcome and can have fun and connect with people. For businesses also who are deciding whether to make investments and sign a long-term lease. I have heard from restaurant owner after restaurant owner when we talk to them, what would make Boston's food scene more vibrant? What would make it easier and faster for you to open a restaurant? Permitting, they say, and so we're working on that. We have gotten rid of some of the permits and annual fees, and we're charging full steam ahead on making that process faster and more supportive. But also the rules, state laws that cap the number of liquor licenses so that we have to ask every time, and we've been very grateful to work with the state and have gotten 225 new licenses over a period of years, and some of them are already exhausted for the neighborhoods, are already totally taken up for some neighborhoods. Others, we still have some left, but restaurant owners are thinking about whether or not to open that next business, and when the costs are high, it just means that we're not going to get the new creative concept that is from someone brand new starting out because they're taking a huge risk. When you have something that, when the system is so built up and it's layer upon layer of regulation and cost after cost, only the most established entities can afford to get through it, and that takes away from all of our enjoyment around the creativity and being able to enjoy fresh and new and maximizing those new voices as well.
But happy hours are state. That's a state.
It is a state law.
So
yes, it has been filed year after year and very much supported.
Mayor Wu, we had, after Shirley Leung wrote a column about the largest undeveloped parcel in Boston, P3, I think it's called. You were on the show, and the line that will live forever, Shirley got it wrong, has been memorialized. Shirley responded to that. Shortly after that, Jeff Brown was here with Amari Paris Jeffries. Reverend Brown is part of the development team. One of the Reverend Brown said, first thing meaning the mayor, called it a pipe dream. Our project isn't a pipe dream. It's actually a deferred dream. It seems to me that what both Reverend Brown and Shirley are saying is that your decision that this development team was not going to be able to get it together, but I think your person said, of course, they can continue to bid to be part of the process. What both were suggesting, and I'm curious to know why you didn't take this path, was that in addition to Madison Park proceeding, as obviously was your decision, why the development project of Tom O'Brien and Reverend Brown couldn't continue to proceed on a parallel track. Why are they not part of that deal? I think do you understand what
yes,
I'm saying? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
And in fact, I really believe everyone actually wants the same ultimate result, which is that in this tract of land, which had belonged to the community and then was ripped away during urban renewal 6 decades ago, and in exchange for promises that there would be a school there would be some healthcare access there, and then there would be economic development there. The school was built up, Madison Park, and now so many years later is in deterioration and needs major investment and major renovations. The healthcare site, Whittier Street, has been built up, and yet that economic development piece, the dream, for 60 years now has not come to fruition. And time after time after time, there had been projects that were proposed, and sometimes they lingered, and the city allowed the designation to continue, and it was extended and extended and extended for 11 years, 7 years, etc. But ultimately, they had to recognize when it was not happening. Here we have a situation where there was a designation made under a different economic set of conditions, right? It was a project that was developed pinned on lab and life sciences being the economic engine that would allow for every other community benefit to be paid for out of it. And then the designation was extended again and again and again over the course of 3 years. And at the same time, Madison Park got a key vote by the Mass School Building Authority that the state was now going to partner with us to design and then partner on the funding of the school. So both are going to happen. Economic development is going to happen, and the school, Madison Park, getting fully rebuilt is going to happen. But we cannot legally be planning both on the same exact parcel of land at the same time. And so we cannot have two entities both holding legal designation or jurisdiction over the same parcel of land and making key decisions about how that will be used. Something has to be prioritized first in just the timeline of it. And because we now have the funding and the state partnership, and that vote happened in early December of last year, we moved quickly to let that economic development parcel's designation expire as it had been scheduled to in January in order to start the planning process for the school. However, or actually I should say, because of that, the school project will likely be able to save in the neighborhood of potentially $200 million if we're able to use the entire parcel of land and map out where the construction should be relative to the existing building, so we don't have to close the school and find swing space and knock down the school or build on the athletic field and take the fields offline. Now we have room to manage all of the timeline of that. And as we figure out what the new boundaries of that economic development parcel will be, it will still be there. It will be a slightly different set of boundaries, and legally we just can't change the boundaries without going back out to the community and through that process. And we also can't be planning these things while multiple people are holding the official authority over it.
Ryan and Austin, you're on with the mayor.
Hello,
Thank you
Ryan.
for calling.
Hi, Mayor Wu. I just have a question about redevelopment and about rezoning. There's been this approach, and I think it matches up with your squares and streets redevelopment approach for decades to try and go community by community, and it pits different communities against each other, and there's always this question of how much are we willing to give up, and a lot of times it just gets stopped by a minority that's very vocal against anything changing in the neighborhood. My question is, what I believe we need to do is what Cambridge and Somerville have done, which is eliminate single-family zoning citywide and take just a more general citywide approach. I mean, Cambridge allowed 6 by right. I don't understand why we can't have that here. So are you prepared to take more aggressive actions like that as opposed to the current just neighborhood by neighborhood thing that in the past has really not worked very well?
Ryan, thanks.
Yeah, Ryan, I agree with you that our zoning code needs major changes, and early on in the last term, we had done a deep dive in showing that our zoning code in Boston is the most complicated of any major city in the country. It is longer than New York City's. It is more convoluted, and most of the time it doesn't matter anyway because it is used as a tool to just force everyone to develop and cohesive, coordinated community vision, but through an appeals process, parcel by parcel, which then leads to really inconsistent results and that kind of pitched battle of us versus them and this neighborhood versus that one. What we are trying to do, I think, twofold. One, yes, as you say, move to more citywide parameters, whether it's through ADUs or other major uses, simplifying the code. And as it stands right now, 90% plus of the buildings that already exist in Boston today are not in compliance with the underlying zoning code. They have gotten there through variances. And so modernizing and updating the code, even just to account for where we are today, and then working to make sure that we will have the right altitude of conversation. We cannot be stuck just talking about heights and density and FAR, floor area ratio. Communities want to have a real planning conversation about all of the needs. And I think in more places than not, the feeling of the symptoms of NIMBYism, the not in my backyard, opposition to changes actually doesn't come from just a pure, I want everything to be how it's always been, but rather it comes from lived experience that when changes happen in a one-off manner, they can actually cause unintended consequences that then don't make sense when you step back and then aren't serving the neighborhood's larger needs anyway. So we have a needs assessment underway citywide right now that's going to get to what every neighborhood needs, not just in housing density and number of units and kinds of units, but specific uses like a grocery store or open space or this kind of retail or that kind of commercial. And then when we talk about all of that together, then it's a much more accurate conversation to have about how development can actually unlock and fuel or drive forward, filling in a lot of the gaps that currently exist in other ways as well, besides just density and height. So we're trying to move on all of that. It is a very neighborhood, we are a city of neighborhoods, and so the one-size-fits-all approach can work in specific ways, but then there are other ways where it can actually end up hindering our efforts in the long run, and we've been doing phased-in approaches on a number of issues as well.
Is zoning your favorite topic? It is, right?
I love it. It's the most important thing.
Okay. By the way, ADUs are accessory dwelling units or granny flats kind of thing. We only have a couple minutes left. Quickly, you brought us.
Yes. This was related to our investment in, I don't know what the color profile is of each of you.
We'll fight about it after the
gray
show.
or black, or gray or dark gray, I guess. These are BPS Athletics hats.
Thank you.
For the first time through our White Stadium deal, we will be creating a BPS Athletics booster fund that this partnership is also generating. So we'll have a way not only to build a stadium, create the spaces, but then sustain it every year afterwards and make sure our young people, Franklin Park, and the larger community have resources.
We only have 90 seconds left. A bunch of people have texted ask what the city is doing for Black History Month before Trump bans Black history. And in a related question, what was your reaction to the posting by Trump of those images of the Obamas on the bodies of apes?
We have had many events already. You can go to the city's website. I think it's boston.gov/BHM. Lamise is nodding yes, to see the full calendar. We had our official kickoff event in City Hall. We actually over the weekend we're just at the historic 12th Baptist Church and renamed a square and celebrated a marker for that very important part of our history, the community that was a stop on the Underground Railroad, the home of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King when he was a student in Boston, and to this day continues to be a leading light. And we'll have a Black Veterans Appreciation Brunch. We will have many events all throughout the neighborhoods as well. So check it out. And on the other note, it's just, when you think it can't get worse, when you think we have reached the bottom of the pit, somehow he still has a shovel and a way to dig down lower. And at the very least, we saw more people speaking out, but it's not an accident, I believe, when this administration throws something out that is so vile, so painful, so racist and regressive and exclusionary. It is all meant to try to pit us against each other and divide us so that a larger agenda of doing what they want to make as much money as they can for the people who matter in their eyes. I believe that that's what it comes down to, and that's why Boston matters. We got to fight back, and we got to prove that there's a different way.
Mayor Wu, as always, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for being with us. That, of course, is Boston Mayor Michelle Wu, who's kind enough to join us every month. Thank you for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio, and to everybody who came down here to the library today. We much appreciate it. You can keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast, or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow, we'll be back here at the library with Harvard National Security expert Juliette Kayyem, naturalist and author Cy Montgomery. Ian Koss of The Big Dig joins us for a conversation about his latest podcast, Catching the Codfather. This very hot ticket guy, you could say, from New Bedford. Also, the former mayor of New Bedford, John Bullard, will be here. Check it out in the latest season of High School Quiz Show. We are going to check that out, excuse me. I want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, additional support from Ronan Keene, our engineer, John the Claw Parker, our executive producer, Jay Bologna. Special thanks to our BPL staff, Maddie Geyer, Bill Francis, Sandra Lopez Burke, our host of the Newsfeed Cafe, and across the street at the Lenox Hotel. The Curiosity Desk starts immediately after we are done at 89.7 GBH and Jared Bone. And the Culture Show starts at 2. Jared's going to speak with the director and CEO of the Museum of Fine Arts, on the recent layoffs there.
And before we go, I just want to say it's the last day of one of the most wonderful people I've met here at the Newsfeed Cafe, Fritz.
Oh, Fritz.
He's been so wonderful to us and so wonderful to everybody. He is missed, but we hope you'll stay in our lives, Fritz. You're a great, great soul. I'm Jim Browdy.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you can tune in tomorrow. Have a great afternoon.
From the stories of centuries past to discoveries that will define our future, How Did We Get Here's, how-tos, and more. Journey with us down the rabbit hole on the Curiosity Desk. Coming up next on GBH 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Bonsai Bar, hosting pop-up beginner bonsai workshops at breweries across New England. Hands-on classes provide guidance in the basics of bonsai design and care in a group setting. More at bonsaibar.com. And PNC Bank, who believes when you pay attention to the details, amazing things can happen. Like when you check the pockets of a jacket you haven't worn since last fall and find $20. PNC Bank, brilliantly boring since 1865.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Today on the Curiosity Desk, buy now, pay later. Sounds easy, enticing, and trouble-free. So there's gotta be a catch, right? We'll take a look at how it works and who it's working for. Plus, a legendary literary larceny. We hear the story of the world's most prolific library thief, who made off with 23,000 books before getting nabbed. And we meet Ann Faver. When she started figure skating, Babe Ruth was still playing baseball. When she started judging figure skating, Harry Truman was in office. Today, she's 103 years old and still at it.
Even today, when I walk into a rink and I'm watching a skater, I can almost feel what she's feeling or he is feeling as he's doing it. I'm just crazy.
It's all ahead this hour on the Curiosity Desk.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is defending his visits to Jeffrey Epstein's island in 2012 in testimony to the Senate Appropriations Committee today. Here he is in an exchange with Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen.
When you visited the private island, did you see anything inappropriate during that visit?
The only thing I saw with my wife and my children and the other couple and their children was staff who worked for Mr. Epstein on that island.
The Commerce Secretary is facing bipartisan criticism over his ties to Epstein, who had been convicted of sexually abusing minors. Lutnick appears in the most recent release of the Justice Department files on Epstein, and a growing number of Democrats are calling on him to resign. And Republican Congressman Thomas Massie also called for his ouster, but the White House has defended him. Chinese company BYD is suing the Trump administration over tariffs. NPR's Emily Fang reports the automaker is asking for a refund of tariffs paid since last spring.
BYD's U.S. subsidiaries have sued the Trump administration in federal U.S. trade court, saying the tariffs it and other U.S.-based companies have had to pay on imported goods are unlawful. This is all in the run-up to a high-stakes Supreme Court case that could be decided this month. Both the U.S. Court of International Trade and a U.S. Federal Appeals Court have already determined President Trump overstepped his powers and using U.S. legislation to impose tariffs on dozens of countries. Now the Supreme Court must decide whether to uphold these decisions. And if it affirms them, companies like China's BYD could very well reclaim a good chunk of the more than $130 billion in U.S. customs collected since last April. Emily Fang, NPR News.
Former Congressman Tom Malinowski conceded today to challenger Ana Lilia Mejia in the closely watched special election Democratic primary to fill the congressional seat vacated by New Jersey Governor Mikey Sherrill. From member station WNYC, Mike Hayes has more.
The race was too close to call last Thursday night, and Election Day ended with 2 of the 11 candidates in the Democratic primary in NJ's 11th district locked in a tight race at the top. Days later, Mejia leads Malinowski by just about 600 votes, with several thousand votes still outstanding. On Tuesday morning, however, Malinowski congratulated Mejia on a, quote, hard-won victory. The Associated Press has not yet officially declared a winner of the race. For NPR News, I'm Mike Hayes in Mount Laurel, New Jersey.
Wall Street's trading higher at this hour. The Dow is up 234 points. You're listening to NPR News.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu says her administration is being clear to ICE about the executive order she signed forbidding ICE agents from using city property for immigration enforcement.
Should the federal government choose, for example, to violate that law, violate these orders, we are not asking or requiring or encouraging our officers to enter into any kind of conflict, but we will be there to document the violations of laws happening.
The mayor says her administration is also discussing ways to better clear snow from city streets and sidewalks. She says frigid cold kept snow piles frozen, and many home and business owners were ticketed for not clearing sidewalks and walkways. Hundreds of students at UMass Boston are waiting to hear when they can get back into their dorm rooms. The Motley East Residence Hall was shut down when a sprinkler pipe burst and flooded the 10th floor yesterday. The building's sprinkler system was disabled, and students spent the night in alternate housing. At last report, the building was closed. Meantime, Emerson College students are taking an active shooter training course this semester. The mandatory instruction comes after a gunman fatally shot 2 Brown University students inside a classroom last year. Snow overnight for some. 1 to 3 inches of snow is forecast for the Boston area. You'll most likely see the first flakes this afternoon. Right now it's cloudy with highs in the 30s. Sunny tomorrow, highs in the 20s, and clouds Wednesday night. Sunshine again on Thursday. 32 degrees in Boston. This is GBH. Thanks for joining us.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher is committed to helping clients stay on track to reach their financial goals and enjoy a comfortable retirement. FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
BH. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III, and this is the Curiosity Desk on. Have you used a buy now, pay later loan to make a purchase before? If you have, you're not alone. January survey data by LendingTree found that 49% of U.S. consumers have used a buy now, pay later, that's BNPL service, like Affirm, Klarna, PayPal, or Afterpay. And the industry is expected to grow and be worth $1 trillion by the year 2031. To talk more about that data and break down how these loans work, we're joined by Matthew Schultz. He's a chief consumer financial analyst at LendingTree and author of the book Ask Questions, Save Money, Make More, How to Take Control of Your Financial Life. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start with the word loan because I think, I think a lot of people maybe don't necessarily think about this as a loan. As we say something like Klarna or Afterpay or Affirm, people maybe think of as a service, but it is in fact a loan. What exactly is a buy now, pay later loan?
Yeah, it's definitely a loan. It's an installment loan at its heart. I mean, a lot of headlines you read will talk about buy now, pay later to refer to a few different types of loans, but generally speaking, what most people are talking about when they talk about buy now, pay later is a pay in for loan where you make your first payment when you're making that initial purchase, and then you make 3 more payments every 2 weeks until the bill is paid off. And the loans are generally interest-free, and they're predictable, they're finite. That's part of what makes those things so popular today, especially for people who don't necessarily want to deal with credit cards and the temptation of having all of that available credit when they've already got enough debt as it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think of this, the thing I encounter most often is I'm shopping online for something, and then I see this option. Usually, I think Klarna and Afterpay are the ones I see most, and it's like, would you like to split this into 4 easy installments, right? And you're like,
Right.
oh, interesting. So, as you say, the way most of these work, 4 payments over a period of time, interest-free. So, as soon as I hear that, I think to myself, well, how do these services make their money if they're not charging interest? So how are these services making their money?
Well, some of it comes from things like late fees, but some of it also would come from relationships with vendors and with merchants. I don't have a ton of information about exactly what those relationships look like, but there are certainly those relationships out there, and it's a little similar to like a retail credit card where where a retailer would get a certain amount of the profit, or there would be some sort of relationship between the merchant and the credit card issuer. I would imagine, I don't know chapter and verse about that relationship, but that's basically it.
So it's part of it. But then, as you say, there are the potential for late fees, and I assume these services, since we group them all under this label "Buy Now, Pay Later" or BNPL, but they are their own companies, and I would imagine they all do it a little bit differently. How does it sort of typically work when you say late fee? Are these huge late fees? Are they modest late fees? When do they stack up? How do they stack up?
It's generally pretty modest. I mean, you're generally talking about anywhere from like $7 to $10 a time, and then with a lot of these buy now pay later lenders, they put a cap on it. So if you were to pay late 4 times, for example, you wouldn't end up necessarily paying the full amount that you ultimately could. Generally, there's often a cap that comes with those late fees. But one of the things that's a challenge for people using buy now, pay later loans is that there isn't kind of the sameness that you have with credit cards, where most credit cards kind of work the same when it comes to fees and dealing with late payments and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But a little more of a wild, wild west kind of thing. And there are even some buy now, pay later lenders that don't charge late fees, but what they will do instead is basically just not give you access to their service anymore. So
kick you off.
It's like, certainly can change.
One strike and you're out.
Yeah. And that's something that makes sense to a degree with their business, because you are dealing with oftentimes folks who may not have perfect credit, maybe a little risky, and somebody who would have a Amex Platinum card or something like that.
Yeah, you're listening to the Curiosity Desk. We're talking with Matthew Schultz, Chief Consumer Finance Analyst at LendingTree, about the popularity of buy now, pay later. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about who's using this and how. And as you pointed out, it's a little bit of the wild, wild west. It's also clearly something that is growing really, really fast. I am surprised to hear that 49% of consumers have used this. I am surprised to hear that we're talking about by the 2030s this being $1 trillion industry. So that is a lot of people adopting this in a very quick period of time. Who's using it? How are they using it? And I imagine, how quickly is that changing?
It's changing really rapidly, and the answer is that every type of person in this country is using it. I mean, it started off where it was basically just young folks, and they were buying designer purses or gaming consoles or maybe like appliances. But now it's something where it's still dominated by younger Americans, by Gen Z and millennials, but boomers use it, Xers use it. Everybody uses it, at least to a degree. And we've seen that growth be really, really steady over the past few years. And what we have also seen change is what people are using the loans for. And like I said, it used to start off with, it started off with people buying clothing and electronics and stuff like that. But now, in the most recent survey that LendingTree did about a year ago, we found that about a quarter of people who have used a buy now, pay later loan say that they have used it to buy groceries, which was really eye-opening, and I think tells you a lot about both people's financial conditions, but also about how easy it is to get these loans and how many different places you can use them.
I sort of feel like this is one of those things where, as I said, when I've been online shopping, I've seen this thing pop up, and like my spidey sense goes off, right? Like I go like this is like I just my natural feeling is like there's a catch here. You're going to get yourself into trouble if you do this. Obviously, that's not necessarily the case. I'm the type of person who I know myself. If I have 4 payments to do over the course of a month, I am going to miss one because I'm not really good about keeping track of what's going on. That said, I have friends who are really good about that kind of thing. They set alerts in their phones for things they have to do. They manage their time really well. And maybe in that case, not that big a deal. LendingTree, my understanding is you have one of the only trackers for people who are using these services because, again, as you say, there are multiple services. Maybe you've got loans out from a couple. They're on these different payment schedules. It feels like something you could really lose track of pretty quickly and get yourself into trouble.
Oh, there's no question. Part of the biggest danger of buy now, pay later is that it's so easy to get, and because this is money generally coming out of checking accounts, if you stack multiples of these loans on top of each other and they have different payment dates, different payment amounts, you have to make sure that you've got the money in that account to be able to pay it. And that can be tricky for the most experienced person, but certainly for somebody who's not that used to managing credit. And we do have a monthly buy now, pay later tracker that we've been doing since December of 21. And one of the things that we ask is how confident people are in their ability to pay off a buy now, pay later loan without incident if they got one in a given month. And generally about anywhere from 85 to 90% of people are at least somewhat confident in that ability. But when you look at the percent who are very confident, it tends to be in the 50s, maybe low 60%. So what that means is that even though that's still a relatively high number, it means an awful lot of people are applying for these loans not being entirely sure to be able to pay it off. And that's been a pretty consistent number throughout the last 4.5 years we've been doing it, and it's troubling.
Do we think that is something that is the nature of how this business is operating, or does that say more about the state of the economy and people's situations by which they're saying, well, if I got, I don't have the money right now, so if I want to get this right now, I got to, do it this way?
I think recently it's certainly a little bit of both, but I do think that to a degree it's just how this stuff is built. Again, talking about like comparing buy now, pay later to like a store credit card, where the goal with both of those tools is to be able to offer that loan to pretty much anybody who walks up to the checkout counter or gets to the online checkout page. And that kind of ubiquity comes with a whole lot of risk. So I think that it makes sense that you're going to see more late payments, more people not sure if they can pay this stuff off. Some of that is just the nature of the business.
I'm talking with Matthew Schultz, Chief Consumer Finance Analyst at LendingTree, about buy now, pay later. What do we know about, generally, I know back in 22, so this is a couple years ago now, Harvard did a study where they were sort of tracking people's spending, and they found that generally, it looks like once a consumer starts using BNPL, their total spending rises, not just kind of right then, but over a period of time. Is this something that a few years later now, has this been adopted by more people? Is this a trend that has remained true?
I don't have specific data that I can necessarily point to, but my general thought is that, yeah, it's true. And some of that is just that the buy now, pay later lenders and the retailers have gotten better and better and better at making these loans available more easily and to be able to use these loans to buy most anything, most any time. And even with buy now, pay later, yeah, you end up spending more, but that's also something that you see with credit cards and other financial tools as well. And that's really, the goal. I mean, retailers and these lenders want people to spend. And there's certainly very much the onus that is on the average person to understand that just because somebody will loan you money doesn't mean that you have to take it or that you can afford it.
Yeah.
And it can be flattering to be offered, a loan with a big amount, or a credit card with a big limit, or a mortgage for a amount that you think is crazy high. But there certainly needs to be some understanding of the individual to recognize, maybe you're offering me that, but maybe I can't. I know that I can't afford it, or I know myself well enough, like you said, to just say, no, I think I'm going to pass on that one.
Yeah, you mentioned credit cards a couple times. I think it immediately springs to mind when you start to think about these, sort of like, how is this like a credit card and not like a credit card? One of the things that, was always told to me is, if you use a credit card responsibly, one of the good things about having a credit card is you build your credit through time, right? So if you're making purchases that you can't afford and then paying that off, well, hey, that gets reported to the credit bureaus. That's how you build credit. Is that the same case? Is that the same in the case of these BNPLs? If you're, are you building credit by using them?
Generally, no, not yet. Last year, FICO, the big credit scoring company, announced that their newest credit scoring formula is going to start to integrate buy now, pay later into credit scoring plans. But there's still a lot behind the scenes that needs to happen before buy now, pay later fully gets integrated into credit scoring. So right now, most of what buy now, pay later brings on in terms of credit scoring is downside, because while these lenders don't necessarily report your positive history to the credit bureaus, some lenders, if you end up paying late or you have other mistakes, may report that negative stuff to the credit bureaus. Not all will, but some will.
Yeah.
So it's important to understand that, but I also do think that it really is just a matter of time before buy now, pay later gets fully integrated into credit scoring. And I think once it is, these loans have the possibility of getting even more popular, because if you're able to build credit with a buy now, pay later loan instead of having to use their credit card or some other tool, I just think it's only going to make these loans more appealing.
You used the term wild west before. You're now talking about, down the road, this becoming more integrated. It feels to me one of the ways something goes from the wild west to be integrated in our larger system is to go through at least some people kicking the tires on regulating it. And this is, I wonder about regulation in this space. I mean, my understanding is, I think there was a New York state law last year, which was one of the first kind of passed, that was saying that, if these companies are going to operate there, they've got to get a license from the New York Department of Financial Services. There were a couple attorneys general sent a letter last December sort of, kind of asking some of these companies, hey, we need some information about this. We're worried maybe you're running afoul of regulations that are already on the books in our state. Where do we stand with regulation of this industry at this point in time?
Yeah, honestly, there's really not much of it. And there's some applications of laws like of fair credit laws that apply to credit cards and other types of loans that apply to buy now pay later. But in terms of specific laws and regulations for buy now pay later, the way that we have like the Credit Card Act and some things like that, that's largely missing. But I do think that at a minimum, disclosure requirements for fees and other such things as it relates to buy now pay later would certainly be useful, because it's just so important that people, at least at a 30,000 foot view, understand what they're getting into with these loans, and it's not always the easiest to do.
So as always, it remains true, buyer beware, even if you're buying now and paying later. We've been speaking with Matthew Schultz. Matthew is Chief Consumer Finance Analyst at LendingTree and author of the book Ask Questions, Save Money, Make More, How to Take Control of Your Financial Life. Matthew, thanks for being with us on the Curiosity Desk.
Thank you.
Stay with us. Just ahead, we'll hear about 4 things we all ought to know this Tuesday, February 10th, with GBH's Gal Zieperman-Lotan, plus the kleptomaniacal capers of the world's most prolific library thief. This is the Curiosity Desk on GBH. Hang around.
If you really want to know what's going on in this country...
Hi, my name is Isaac. I'm calling from Columbus, Ohio.
You have to get away from the extremes and listen to the middle.
This is Samantha calling from St. Louis, Missouri.
On The Middle with Jeremy Hobson, I take your calls live on some of the biggest issues we face.
While I have hope for change, there are so many issues that I feel like are not being discussed on either side.
Join me each week on The Middle.
Thursday night at 9 on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Brightbound, helping students as young as middle school identify their strengths, explore their passions, and navigate a path to a rewarding career. Learn more at brite.bound.org. And Dover Rug and Home, rugs and carpeting for today's lifestyle with in-home rug trial and design consultation. Dover Rug in Natick, Boston, Burlington, and online at doverrug.com. Dover Rug, rugs and the people who know them.
Welcome back to the Curiosity Desk. I'm Edgar B. Horbuck III. Our senior producer, Aidan Connolly, is with me now. Hello, Aidan.
Hey, Edgar.
Aidan, you know that today, February 10th, is a red letter day in the history of chess and artificial intelligence. Indeed, it was on this day in 1996 that IBM's Deep Blue defeated Garry Kasparov. It was the first time a machine won a chess game against a reigning world champion under regular time controls.
But if I'm remembering correctly, Kasparov lost a game, but he didn't lose the match, right?
That is correct. Good memory. Kasparov won 3 of the next 5 games, and then 2 more were a draw. So yeah, he ultimately won the match 4-2.
Like Rocky against Apollo Creed. They did face off the next year.
They did, and this time Deep Blue won the entire match.
Why was it called Deep Blue anyway?
So its predecessor was a chess program, which was called Deep Thought. And that itself was a reference to the supercomputer in the novel Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is great.
Yeah.
And then IBM's sort of corporate nickname was Big Blue. So they just sort of smashed them together.
All right, well, that's one nugget of history for February 10th. Meanwhile, our GBH News colleague Gal Zieperman-Lotan is here now for a few items from today's news. Gal, hello.
Hello, good to be with you all.
Glad to have you.
Let's start talking about immigration enforcement. So across the country, we've been seeing members of Congress go into ICE field offices and detention centers to inspect them and to talk to the people inside. Yesterday, Representative Catherine Clark said she tried to go into the ICE field office in Burlington, but officers would not let her in. Here's what she told GBH's Soraya Wintersmith.
We have heard that people are being kept there way past when they should be. They are having trouble accessing basic things like showers and really critical constitutional things like their lawyers.
Representative Clark said she will go to court to try and get explicit permission to visit the ICE facility unannounced.
So surely something we will be keeping an eye on and keeping you all updated about as it develops. Gal, you've also got an update on a deadly incident that happened a couple of years back.
Yes. So in 2024, you'll remember a man who was training to be a state police trooper died after being injured during a boxing match at the State Police Academy.
Yeah.
Now, 4 people who work for the academy have been indicted for involuntary manslaughter. The recruit's name was Enrique Delgado Garcia. He was 25 and he lived in the Worcester area. Before he went into the academy, he was a victim and witness advocate for the local district attorney's office. Here's attorney David Meyer, who investigated the case.
Members of the State Police Training Academy committed a series of wanton and reckless acts in connection with various defensive tactics and physical confrontation training exercises conducted at the academy.
Meyer said that Delgado Garcia was injured during sparring matches that were, quote, unauthorized, unapproved, and unsupervised.
It is really sad.
Yeah, it's a sad story.
Yeah, and our colleagues in the newsroom will continue following it. So also in the news, as I'm sure you've noticed, it's been cold.
It's been warm.
Yeah.
In fact, we have noticed.
Yeah, so did some patients at the UMass Memorial Medical Center in Marlborough.
Okay.
More than 70 patients had to be evacuated into the cold on Sunday night after a valve broke and flooded the basement of the hospital, which meant parts of the building's heating system weren't working.
Oof, that is not great.
So things were improving yesterday. The flooding had stopped and some emergency patients were being accepted, but most inpatient and outpatient appointments were canceled.
That is a difficult situation, but it sounds like at least right now being managed. Gal, you got one last item for us before you go?
Yes, we're going to end with our neighbors up north. So Nova Scotia is looking to build some offshore...
really up north.
Yeah. Nova Scotia is looking to build some offshore wind farms, and they want Massachusetts to get involved. Governor Maura Healey and Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston have agreed to share knowledge and cooperate in other ways, possibly leading to one day when Massachusetts could import wind energy from Canada.
Cool.
Now, at this point, Nova Scotia has not started any wind farm construction, but they have 4 spots in mind and they want to learn from our Cape Wind project. The Canadian Premier says, quote, "We'll have a lot of excess energy. We want to get that to a market somewhere."
All right, 4 news items for today, and you can learn 4 things every single day in the GBH newsletter written by Gal. Subscribe for free at gbh.org/daily.
Gal, Aiden, thanks for being with us.
Hey, thanks
for having us.
It's time now for our first of what will be a regular check-in with our resident prospector of all things interesting, Erin McCarthy. Erin's a writer and editor based in New York. She's also the former editor-in-chief of MentalFloss.com, where she hosted The List Show on YouTube. Each week, Erin scours the internet and her personal library, uncovering offbeat and insightful stories, forgotten facts, and tantalizing trivia, all around a given theme to share with us. Erin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So what's our theme today?
Today, we're going to be talking about Library Lovers Day, which happens on Valentine's Day, February 14th. And, you know, all due respect to Valentine's Day, but like, have you ever been in a library? That's like some really swoon-worthy stuff, I think. So,
well, who knew? Who knew that I didn't even know there was a day for library lovers, but I'm glad to know there is.
Yeah, it started in Australia in 2006, and now it's celebrated around the world. Thank goodness. So I have a bunch of fun facts about libraries today.
Let's get into it. Tell me some fun things about libraries.
All right. So the first library in America was created by Ben Franklin. He founded the Library Company of Philadelphia in 1731. It started with a group called the Junto, whose members tried to better themselves through debate and discussion. Franklin thought they needed a library of books they could refer to for facts, which makes sense. His library had shareholders who paid a subscription fee to access the books, and eventually this model was so successful that they opened up the library to non-shareholders so that they could also pay a small fee to borrow books.
Okay.
The model took off. Soon there were more than 40 lending libraries in the U.S. It's important to note that Franklin's library was a fee-based lending library.
Yeah, needed the money.
They needed those funds to keep things going.
This is even before his face was on any of the money. So, you know.
In fact, yeah. For sure. But the institution that's widely considered to be the first public library in the U.S. is the Franklin Public Library in Franklin, Massachusetts.
Hey, right in our backyard.
We always want to bring it back to Massachusetts. And that dates back to 1790. So the town had gone by Exeter, but in 1778, they incorporated as Franklin in honor of Ben Franklin, who there was a rumor he had been assassinated overseas. Thankfully, not
really?
true. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
There was, I think he was in France at the time. So, he was doing important things. And I guess they thought maybe he'd been assassinated. Thankfully, not true.
Yeah.
But later on, when they wanted to build a meeting house, Franklin was asked to donate a bell for it. But it was, wartime and bells were hard to come by. So Franklin came up with a plan B. He basically said that with sense being preferable to sound, that he would donate books instead.
Oh, amazing.
Which is genius. And then the drama became who should be allowed to use these books. A vote was taken in a town meeting, and it was decided that all of the residents of the town of Franklin should be able to use those books for free. And so that library became a public library. And you can still see those books at the Franklin Public Library today.
That's incredible. And also it's incredible that Franklin is the name of the town in addition, that does a public library, in addition to the fact that Ben Franklin is the one who sort of starts the first sort of for-fee library.
It all comes together.
A perfect circle. You're listening to The Curiosity Desk. We're talking with writer and editor Erin McCarthy. She's got a list for us, which she's going to have for us every week. This list is about libraries because we've got Library Lovers Day coming up on February 14th. What's next on your list? Give me some more library love.
Okay, so there is a Guinness World Record holder for most prolific book thief.
That's awesome.
It's awesome.
Tell us more.
From the 1970s all the way to 1990, Stephen Bloomberg stole more than 23,000 books from hundreds of libraries around North America. And when they put all these books together, I guess they weighed them, and they were 19 tons, which is so many books. The books that Bloomberg was stealing were not like the latest Booker Award winner or the latest Pulitzer Prize winner. He was taking like the rarest of rare volumes, a Bible
really nice books. Oh.
Yes, like a Bible from 1840 that was printed by hand, a world history written before Columbus came to the Americas, first edition of Milton's Paradise Lost, stuff like that.
Wow.
And he was taking these books from libraries at Harvard, USC, Duke, many others. And these were genuine heists. Like, he would go and case the library during the day, sometimes for weeks at a time, just to get the lay of the land and see how the library was working. And then next, he'd swipe keys. And sometimes he would make a copy of the key and return it to the key ring before anybody even knew that they were missing. And then he would go back at night and take what he wanted. He was very small and very thin, so he could squeeze through like ventilation ducts and the gaps in security gates and climb up dumbwaiter shafts. Like, the fact that a movie hasn't been made about this is crazy.
That is insane
to me.
Yeah.
And so basically, he believed that modern society no longer appreciated beautiful, high-quality things, and he thought that it was his duty to protect those things. He called himself a rescuer of the past.
Wow.
He had money from a family trust, and he lived really frugally. So basically, like 6 months out of the year, he was traveling the country, usually with an accomplice, casing libraries and stealing books, and he would rent apartments and storage units and squirrel away his books there.
This is incredible. How did he get caught?
A former accomplice turned him into the FBI. So basically, nobody really noticed that he was pulling off these heists, which also seems crazy.
Even though they were like pretty important books, you would imagine in some of these libraries, like that they would notice, like if the Gutenberg Bible was gone.
You would think. So he was turned in by a former accomplice. And then when he went to trial, his attorney claimed that he was not guilty by reason of insanity on the basis of bibliomania, which is basically the uncontrollable urge to collect books.
Wow.
Which I also have, but I'm not, stealing anything from libraries. He was sentenced to 71 months and ordered to pay a $200,000 fine. He served around 4.5 years and was released in 1995. He's been arrested since for burglary. Another one of his obsessions was antique furnishings and fixtures. So the police caught him looting houses a few times, but he hasn't been arrested since 2003. So.
Wow, incredible stuff. We're talking with Erin McCarthy about bizarre, fascinating stories of library lovers throughout history in honor of Library Lovers Day, which happens to fall on Valentine's Day. What else do you have for us? These are great. I want more.
So there is a library that straddles the U.S.-Canada border.
Really?
Yes, there's literally a line right through the floor of the library.
Wow.
So the Haskell Free Library and Opera House opened in 1901. It's located in both Stansted, Quebec and Derby Line, Vermont. And yeah, you can see the border. It's actually drawn on the floor of the building. The main entrance is on the US side, but most of the books are on the Canadian side. The Opera House has most of its seats in the US, but the stage is in Canada. So it's a little weird, but I feel like if you love libraries or just want to stand in two places at once, this is a place you have to put on your list.
Yeah, this is incredible. How do they pull it off? How does it work?
Yeah, it used to be, I think it's a little bit more complicated these days, but it used to be you could just walk in whichever side of the border you were on. It served both countries and you could just pop right in. I don't think that's the case anymore, but it used to be.
Amazing stuff. All right. Yeah. So one of the premises here, I know when you're researching these lists, in one of our conversations before we started to do this segment, you said, I find myself going down these rabbit holes and looking at all these sort of things that are adjacent to what I'm supposed to be doing. So I want to end this segment by letting you take us on one of the tangents your brain went on while you were researching this list for us. So please, if you could, Aaron McCarthy, take us on a tangent.
Okay, so thinking about libraries got me thinking about taking books out of libraries.
Yes.
And then missing the deadline and having to pay late fees. I don't know if you're guilty of this, but I am super guilty of this.
I mean, listen, at the beginning of the show, we were talking about buy now, pay later. And I was saying, I don't do buy now, pay later because I will miss my deadlines for paying and then I will owe late fees. So yes, I have absolutely been, I am of the type who will miss a deadline.
Yeah, I definitely held on to some Sweet Valley High books for way longer than I should have.
I mean, fair. Those are. I mean, you want to talk about books worth reading over and over again. So I can kind of understand that. Yeah, very compelling stuff.
Compelling stuff. But thankfully, neither one of us, I hope, has let it go as long as some people have.
Oh, tell me, some people? Which people?
Oh, some people. There was a person who checked out a book called Your Child, His Family and Friends by Francis Burke Strain from the San Antonio Library in July 1943.
Okay.
And didn't return it until August 2025. 82 years.
82 years. Now,
82 years.
Do we know, did this person return it of their own volition? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, were they I don't know, moving house after 82 years and say, oh, there's that book, I should bring it back to the library? Or how do you after 82 years do it?
I think with a lot of these stories, it's like somebody finds it and they're like, uh-oh, I should return this.
Yeah.
This was the case of a woman who took out the picture of Dorian Gray from the Chicago Public Library and returned it 78 years later. This happens all the time.
Do you think she tried putting the book in her attic, thinking that maybe if she had the book up in her attic, then she wasn't going to age and that's why she had it for so long? I mean, potentially,
Probably.
At least in that case, it sort of makes sense to me.
It does make sense. What I think is particularly great, though, is that even founding fathers were guilty of this. George Washington himself forgot to return a book.
Never told a lie, but forgot to return a book.
The GW. He was 5 months into his presidency, and he borrowed a book called The Law of Nations from the New York Society Library. It was in Mount Vernon for the next 221 years.
No, come on.
It wasn't returned until 2010.
What? Now, again, here, presumably the people at Mount Vernon knew before 2010 that this had happened, or I guess maybe not.
Yeah, and the New York Society Library, one of the librarians there cracked a joke about it. So everybody knew it was there. Everybody knew where it was. And eventually it did make its way back. But yeah, George Washington.
Wow. Now, are you pretty certain that right now you don't have any books out of the library that need to go back? Have you gone through everything and you're in good standing?
Yes, I know that for a fact because I'm currently banned from taking books out of the library until I finish my physical TBR, which is 50 books deep. So,
oh my gosh, amazing.
As I said, bibliomaniac.
Erin, before I let you go, just make the case for why we ought to take a moment on February 14th and in our hearts love libraries.
Libraries are one of the greatest institutions in the world. You know, I can't imagine anything cooler than just going to a library, being able to browse, take a book out for free, read it, and then you get to return it. You can learn so much. You can expand your world. And not only that, but libraries also offer a lot of services beyond just borrowing books. So everybody should love libraries.
And a lot of them are beautiful, and it's just fun to be walking around with like lots of books on shelves. They're also neatly organized. It sort of feels great, right?
It does feel great.
All right. We've been speaking with Erin McCarthy. She's writer and editor based in New York. You might know her as the former editor-in-chief of MentalFloss.com, where she also hosted The List Show on YouTube. Erin, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Stay with us, you out there, because just ahead we have the charming, delightful 103-year-old figure skating judge who's still got an eye for new talent. This is the Curiosity Desk on GBH. Stay with us.
The joy of giving is a year-round endeavor, and a GBH gift membership is a perfect gift for any occasion. Unlock thousands of hours of PBS shows with GBH Passport, from Ken Burns to Rick Steves and so much more. You'll also unlock exclusive savings from New England businesses and access discounts on GBH events. And the best part? This gift lasts for a whole year. Now that's going above and beyond. For more information, visit gbh.org/gift membership.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And GM Roth Design Remodeling, providing custom kitchens, bathrooms, and accessory dwelling units. Their design team works to create living-in-place solutions tailored to the needs of each home and family. More information at gmroth.com. And Cambridge School of Culinary Arts in Porter Square, offering teen and adult recreational cooking and baking workshops, series, and cooking couples classes for culinary enthusiasts. CambridgeCulinary.com.
You're listening to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. We're streaming live at youtube.com/GBH News. Recently, I took a trip down to the Skating Club of Boston in Norwood to get a window into the world of figure skating judges. Now, this was for an episode of the Curiosity Desk YouTube series, and that video's that's up right now if you're interested in watching that. Now, while we were there, we were lucky enough to meet a legend in U.S. figure skating circles, a woman who at 103 years old, and yes, you just heard that right, 103, is as dedicated to the sport as ever and as sharp as a blade.
My name is Ann Faver, and I am a national figure skating judge in multiple disciplines. My love of the disciplines is synchro, so I do mostly synchro judging at this point.
Synchro is short for synchronized skating, where 8 to 20 skaters perform as a team. It's not currently an Olympic event, though it is on the path to be. Still, over the years, Faver has been a judge at the national level for singles, pairs, and ice dance. And her judging career stretches back to when Harry S. Truman was president. The days when competitions included compulsories, where skaters had to trace a series of precise figures into the ice, hence the term figure skating.
I liked the figures, and I think they were very beneficial to our skating. I think maybe today there are some of the skaters who would do well to go back and do some of them. They teach you edges and turns.
Wow.
So that's my personal opinion.
Old school, as they would say.
That's correct.
Faver began skating on outdoor rinks as a child in the 1930s in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, and the sport enchanted her from the start.
I always enjoyed various activities that were athletic. But there was something that was very peaceful to me about skating, especially with the music. And I loved putting the music and the motion of the skating together. And I was somewhat self-taught until I talked my dad into letting me have lessons. And that just started me going right up the test ladder.
Faver skated into adulthood, but judging turned out to be her calling. She received her first official judging appointment in 1949, and while she's never judged at the Olympics, she was a fixture at premier U.S. competitions, including the U.S. Nationals, for decades.
One of the nationals I did was in 1961 when we had the plane crash in Belgium.
That plane crash killed everyone on board, an event tragically echoed last year when the skating community lost 28 of their own in a mid-air collision in Washington, D.C. That 1961 crash killed the entire U.S. figure skating team as it was on its way to compete at the World Championships in Prague, a memory that is still vivid for Ann Faver.
I judged those kids. I knew them. I had known some of them for a long time. It certainly is a very meaningful mark in my skating career.
Yeah. How much has the sport changed over Faver's long career? Well, when she started judging, double jumps were at the cutting edge. Over the decades, she's watched triple jumps become de rigueur for both men and women skaters, and now the rise of quadruple jumps.
Today, everybody is wanting to be number one, which is understandable, and they're looking to do tricks. And I think some of the skating that we watch are more tricks, which to my mind do not add much to the whole picture. I don't want to say it reminds me of Barnum and Bailey, but there are a few times when I would say that would be apropos.
So the quads.
Okay, that's a whole different subject to me.
Go on.
In order to do a quad, it is my opinion that you have to have the build, among other things, in order to do it, in order to spin fast enough to get that quad going. And there's some people who are never going to be able to do that. So I think it's exciting to see the quads and what they can do. I'm not taking away from all the new things they are doing, but I also like to go back to the days and see that they can show me some beautiful footwork that includes the edges and the turns done with the music. That is the key.
That's the heart of figure skating for you.
For me. Yeah.
Being a competitive skater at the highest level is obviously not easy. It takes dedication, nerve, discipline, and 100 other things. Faver says it isn't all that different for skating judges.
You have to be careful not to be too sympathetic. If they make a mistake, you've got to honestly say it was a mistake. You feel badly, but okay, there's one deduction that you're going to have to admit happened and mark accordingly. On the other hand, I love it when a program is finished and I have watched a beautiful performance and feel I can give really good marks to this. I liked it. They did a job. They did everything they should do, and they performed well, and I have the pleasure of giving them a nice high mark.
If anything, what do you think people who, especially more casual skating fans, figure skating fans, what would you like them to know about the sport, about the role of judges, about the role of people like you who have been at it for decades, just kind of doing your thing, keeping it alive here?
I hope that they realize that there is a strict enough standard for our judges to learn and continue to learn as they serve as judges, so that they feel that what they put out there is truly being evaluated to the best of one's ability. It's a big responsibility.
And just like the more than 1,000 U.S. figure skating judges at the regional, sectional, and national levels, Faver does all of this work as a volunteer.
It's a fraternity or a sorority, first of all, I think. You make good friends across this country as you serve. There's a lot of enjoyment that comes from judging, as well as the stress. And you do have to learn to balance that. You have to be realistic with yourself. And there are times, not many, but there are times when you say after a competition, maybe I was too hard. And it's a very fine line between keeping within the rules and giving a numerical mark that reflects what you truly have evaluated from the performance.
I feel like if I feel like if I get a good score from you, then I earned that good score. This is what I'm getting a sense of.
I hope that's how they all feel. I've had the pleasure of living long enough to have some of the little ones I judged grow up as adults, and I will meet them off in Timbuktu, where they also are serving as a judge. And they will come up to me and say, "I'm glad to meet you. Do you know you gave me 3rd place?" And, it's fun because sometimes you do remember the person.
Yeah.
And so it is fun to see them all grown up, and now they're judging, learning to judge.
As for why, at 103 years old, Faver is still at it, that's pretty simple. It's the same as it was when she first stepped onto the ice as an 8-year-old. She is enchanted by skating.
My heart's with the skater when I'm watching him.
What do you mean by that, your heart's with the skater?
I can almost feel what they're going through. I can almost tell you what they're going to do next by what they're doing on the ice. But inside of me, I can feel what she's feeling or he is feeling as he's doing it. I'm just crazy.
And thank you so much. I give you a 10 for this interview.
My pleasure. Oh my.
That is 103-year-old U.S. figure skating judge Ann Faver. Special thanks to Jack Doyle and the entire Curiosity Desk video team for their help with that interview. And just as a reminder, you can check out the full story on the GBH News YouTube channel. Well, now with me is the much younger, much more spry Jared Bowen of GBH's The Culture Show.
If only I could earn that integrity at 103.
Unbelievable, right? Wow. And what's crazy, Jared, is when we were down at the skating club, she was not only there doing an interview with us and doing some judging, she was physically down at the ice, opening the gate for skaters to come in and out. I was like, this is nuts. This woman is incredible.
That's extraordinary. I do think to some degree there, if you can will it forward, I've met so many people like that, and you think they have willed this. I know nature takes its course.
Totally.
But it's a good lesson for us all.
Yeah. Speaking of good lessons for us all, there's always good lessons on The Culture Show. What do you got going on the show today?
So we'll start with MFA Director Pierre Turjanian. You might know that the MFA has been in the news recently. It, like many other arts organizations around the country, have been facing massive funding gaps. And so they had some staff layoffs recently, and we'll address those with Pierre Turjanian because there has been some criticism that's come the museum's way that it's retrenched from DEI initiatives. So we'll have that conversation. John Sayles, the Oscar-nominated screenwriter and novelist, is here.
The big names just flying at us recently with the show, Jared.
His new novel is Crucible, and it takes us into the era of Henry Ford, which is a fascinating era when you look at the power that this one man had and you think about today. So we'll talk about that. And then Ken Urban joins us. He's a playwright about his new show, The Moderate, at Central Square Theater, which is all about one man who has to look at the content that should likely be removed from online platforms. And what looking at that horrifying, and these are real life jobs, and what looking at that content does to a person.
Wow, riveting stuff. That sounds like a great show. I'm going to tune in.
All right.
And you should too. The Culture Show follows us in just a few minutes, so stick around here on GBH 89.7. And that's it for us for now. The Curiosity Desk is produced by Aidan Connolly, Rachel Armani, Olivia Corcio, Hannah Loss, and Nicole Garcia. Patty Daniels is our steady hand. Our engineer today is John the Claw Parker. Special thanks to David Goodman and Andrew Massoa for their audio engineering skills. We'll be back in 23 short hours live here on GBH 89.7 and streaming live on YouTube. Until then, I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. You stay curious out there.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Explo, from culinary arts to veterinary science, Explo's summer program helps middle schoolers to find their spark. Day and overnight options at explo.org/summer. Priority deadline February 13th. Henry Louis Gates Jr. traces the family trees of talk show host Sarah Haynes and playwright Tracy Letts, traveling from frontier towns in the American West to surprising places in the East. Watch Finding Your Roots tonight at 8 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, layoffs at the Museum of Fine Arts have put a spotlight on how major cultural institutions survive tough financial times. The MFA is confronting rising costs, attendance challenges, and criticism about its commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. MFA Director Pierre Turjanian joins us to talk about the cuts, the controversy, and the museum's path forward. Then John Sayles, the Oscar-nominated filmmaker and celebrated novelist, joins us to talk about Crucible, his sweeping new work of historical fiction. Set during the rise of industrial America, the novel immerses us in Henry Ford's Detroit to explore power, labor, and the forces that reshaped the nation. And playwright Ken Urban joins us to talk about The Moderate, his new drama that pulls back the curtain on content moderation, and who is reviewing all the online images that, for their violence, racism, and more, are not meant for the rest of us to see. What happens when your job is to watch the internet at its worst, and what does it cost to keep scrolling? That's all right now on The Culture Show.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show, live on 89.7 and streaming on the GBH News YouTube channel. Boston's Museum of Fine Arts is one of the city's most prominent cultural institutions, home to a vast and priceless collection, world-class exhibitions, and a staff that keeps it all running. But last month, the MFA announced it was laying off 33 employees to address a projected $13 million budget shortfall brought on by rising costs and shifting attendance trends. The decision comes at a time when museums and performing arts organizations nationwide are navigating similar challenges, which also include, in some cases, a sizable loss in funding, federal and otherwise. At the MFA, the layoffs have been controversial. Some former employees, art world figures, and community members say the cuts amount to the museum backing away from its commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. They've pointed to the dismissal of curators of color in its Islamic, Native American, and fashion arts departments, not to mention key staff leading or in programs and museum divisions dedicated to DEI and accessibility efforts. Pierre Turjanian is the MFA's director. He joins me now to discuss what led to the recent staffing changes, what they mean for the museum's programs and priorities, and how the museum plans to move forward. Pierre Turjanian, welcome back to the Culture Show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you for having me.
Well, just to back up and understand what the museum is facing, what does it mean, this $13 million budget shortfall, and how it's materialized?
Well, thank you for the question. The MFA has had a long-standing deficit, but it's getting worse, basically it's spiraling. This means that the way that our expenses grow is outpacing our revenue. And as a result of that, we're seeing a bigger gap between the two. We had reserves, which allowed us to cover some of these losses, but the reserves are nearing exhaustion. And we're therefore in a position where we had to take immediate action.
And is this something that is, how specific is it to what's happening at the MFA and what we see happening at a number of major arts organizations like the Metropolitan Opera most recently around the country?
It has a lot to do with the way that institutions like ours are funded. They have an endowment that provides a little bit of a revenue that is applied to operation, but it also needs earned revenue and annual giving. And those are the three pillars of what makes the MFA sustain itself. And what we're seeing is that since the pandemic, the world has changed. The visitors around us have more competition for their attention. More things are delivered to their door. They can stream content from home. So when they get out, they're very discerning about what their options are. And we need to evolve to keep up with our shifting expectations. So that's one thing. And the other thing is the environment is not very conducive. International tourism is not particularly strong at this time. So we also have to think of pattern of tourism. And while we, at the end of fiscal year 25, welcome back 1 million visitors, it is not quite where we were before the pandemic. And membership has grown back, but still not to the level where we were. And I think there are a few institutions in the country that are exactly faced with the exact same problem.
You're relatively new to the job. You were last on the show just in the summertime when you were appointed to the job. This is a pretty sizable crisis, it sounds like. Is crisis the right word that you're facing and that materialized as you took the job and scanned the museum and business operations?
Thank you. Well, I knew about having worked at the Museum of Fine Arts before getting the job of a director, which started on July 1st. I was, of course, aware, as is the board of trustees, that we had a structural deficit that was going to grow bigger. So I took the job understanding there were hard times ahead, but I believe in the museum's mission. I believe in the service of museums to their communities. And I understood that the first step, which was probably not the one that would favor, I love it, very interesting programming, creating engagement. It was to start with stabilizing this institution. We need to be able to keep our doors open if we want to serve. We have a duty not just to our current constituents, but to actually serve future generations. So there was a management piece that was essential. And at the same time, as part of the reduction in force of the layoffs, we reorganized the museum to position ourselves so that we are better equipped to meet our audience where it is and to deliver on all the aspirations that we've had for ourselves and most importantly for everybody who is engaged with the museum.
For the staffing reductions, how do you get to that point where you recognize that you have to take the very unfortunate act of letting people go, some people who've worked at the museum for decades?
Yeah, I think some of the pain that we have felt and we're seeing also in the community has to do with the fact that our staff is accomplished, deserving, has commenced credit within their profession and beyond. And so the elimination of a single position doesn't seem to make sense because it's a net loss. We have deserving individuals who were let go. There's been a lot of focus on the curators, but we have eliminated 33 positions. They were experts in their respective areas that were let go as part of this reduction force. So how we went about it, we had to consider our activity levels, that is all the things we do, and what we can maintain while reducing and while having a reduction in force. So a lot of cuts were operational, administrative, They don't seem to have the visibility than other positions, but those were essential positions until now. And we were able to do that work thinking about our commitments. So our commitments include serving our visitors, and for that we need to keep the doors open. So we have the staff that is processing visitors, greeting visitors, helping them navigate. We have a building that needs maintenance, so all the maintenance staff also very much top of mind. And the security, we want the collection to be secure, we want our visitors to be secure, we want our staff to be secure. So this forced us to look at everything else. And among that were the areas where you create the connection with the art through programs, community programs, and others, curatorial as well. I came here to tell you that all our learning, community celebrations, teens program are intact in terms of capacity. So we looked for efficiencies. We didn't want to compromise on what we have to offer.
If I go back to what you were just talking about with maintaining the programming, this is where the community blowback has entered, because people are wondering how the MFA could possibly continue with its programming and exhibitions in Islamic art and Judaica and Native American art if you have people of color who are no longer bringing their stories, their backgrounds, their expertise to these departments.
Yeah. So our collection is vast. We have 500,000 objects. And we have to cater to these objects. And at the same time, we also want to create engagement. And so there's a tension between our obligation to what we have and what we want to bring in, additional acquisition, and creating this engagement. We still have 34 curators. And the guidelines for reviewing all positions in curatorial, we eliminated 7 positions, was to look very carefully at those small departments that only have one staff and one supervisor, one chair, and not eliminating anything from our portfolio, making sure that we would continue to represent those collections. So it's the largest department that were the most heavily impacted, and that resulted in the elimination of people who are uniquely positioned to create this engagement because of their lived experiences, because of their cultural sensitivity. There's no question, and they had built strong ties with our community, and I understand our community is upset and alarmed. But behind this was the reasoning that we had areas where multiple curators overlap, and we can ensure that we're going to continue to cater to all the areas that you just mentioned. The curator who installed the Islamic art galleries is a curator of South Asian art and Islamic art, and is going to care for, interpret in partnership with the community and the conservators, specialized staff for those collections, for example.
Curators who are overlapping, are they curators of color?
We still have 7 curators of color on 34, so we is it enough? No. But we are, the decision was more likely to have more impact on certain areas of the museum's operation when you look at the services that were directly essential for the doors to remain open. So what we have is the more programmatic area and operation. But I'm here to tell you also that the percentage of people of color employed by the MFA has not changed. It's true also of the number of people of color in management roles. So while the elimination of roles is very visible in the curatorial area, we did our best to be very thoughtful. And this was a very complicated, painful exercise that involved multiple members of my team to come to this decision. There's no question that we're suffering a loss of expertise, of institutional memory, of connections within the professional body and with our community as a result.
And I feel like you have addressed to some degree what I'm about to ask, but I know that you're aware of the calls from the community, the observation from the community, from their perspective, that there were hard-won gains for DEI initiatives over the last few years. We all saw what happened after the murder of George Floyd and how arts organizations, whether they be theaters or museums, Hollywood, had to address the lack of people of color within their industries galleries, their museums, theater, and that we're talking about people who are curators, but people who are on boards, people who are administrative positions, and the optics, as they called out, and I think you've acknowledged to some degree the optics weren't great on this, that there has been a retrenchment by the Museum of Fine Arts from those gains that people felt were put in place over the last 5 years. How do you answer that?
Well, I respect how everybody feel, because communities have had a unique connection to one individual who represent, in their view, the institutional commitments. But our commitments always exceed what a single individual is doing. And when it comes to representation, there's always more work to do. There's no question about that. That's done through acquisitions, that's done by having the colleagues who can speak to the work. But from some time already, we have acknowledged that even when you have a professional curator who's a specialist, you have to share the authority with the community. We have a program called Table of Voices that invite the voices of the community as we think about major reinstallation, exhibition. Our forthcoming reopening of the Arts of America galleries, 18th century galleries, will show the fruit of this work with the community. It represents, it includes indigenous voices, and it's also 3 years of planning that our former curator of Native American art has worked so hard to bring together. So we're not walking back on IDA. We actually believe that this should permeate everything that the institution does. You mentioned the board, you mentioned workforce. It's so much also about the programs that we're putting in place. We have exciting exhibition in that regard. We have gallery renovations in that regard. I mentioned the Art of Americas and more. But we also are creating a new position in our formerly known Human Resource Department, now called People and Culture, a position that is going to ensure that we create a sense of belonging and inclusion, but also provide opportunities. And that's going to be a professional development and IDA position that is designed to give our staff the support that they need to both be empowered to be the professionals that they are, the best professionals that they are, but also to have opportunity for upward mobility. I believe very strongly in investing more heavily in our staff and sending a signal to them all.
I'm speaking with Pierre Turgenean, Director of the Museum of Fine Arts. To move away from staffing for a moment, what about exhibitions and acquiring artworks? Is there going to be an impact on just the content of the museum going forward?
No impact whatsoever. We have made sure that we retain our agency to craft our own program, that no outside forces would require us to modify what we believe in.
Let me translate. You're talking about I assume the Trump administration indicating that it doesn't want museums like yours to tell certain aspects of American history that don't quote unquote. Well, I don't want to. I'm not saying it. I mean, it's an exact quote, but doesn't want you to tell parts of history that don't uphold America, essentially.
We believe in complexity. We believe in nuances. We believe in shared authority. We believe in outside voices. This is what you will see in the forthcoming 18th century galleries, but this is part of our work. It's integral. So in terms of forthcoming exhibition, we're drawing more and more from the permanent collection. Our collection should be doing more of the work. We want to be more careful about what we borrow and loans. Our international commitments will remain, but they need to be recalibrated. So our Nubian gallery, a Nubian art gallery, we have the second best collection of Nubian art in the world. And we have a gallery that is the beginning of how we're going to present 3,000 years of a history that we're ideally equipped to tell. We have an exhibition on a Brazilian photographer called Rosa Angela Reno coming up, and I'm very excited about that. At the same time, we're also drawing from the permanent collection to do a cross-cultural exhibition about the idea of the garden as experienced, as imagined, and that's drawing from anything from ancient works from Pompeii to contemporary photography. It will include a lot of our great Asian works. Our collection is so strong in that area. And so, no, we're going to continue to be directing our attention to expanding the canon of art history, to feature stories that are fresh. Divine Color, an exhibition that just opened, which is so much about how a technology imported by the British at the colonial times enabled printmakers in Calcutta to create images of devotion. Then instead of being in temples, they used to have been hand painted, enter the homes of everybody and basically bring worshiping at home, and that changed the practice of religion in all of India, and it created also a new visual repertory. So this is fresh. This is a kind of exhibition that we want to continue to do, and we want to have the leeway to do so, and you will do more of them.
You've mentioned a lot of the permanent collection, which people who may not necessarily know the museum business, the majority of your collection is in storage. It's because it's so vast. It's rare we get to see that. But also sometimes museums, when they get into financial straits, and if they have permission, they deaccession works, meaning they sell works. Is that off the table for the Museum of Fine Arts?
So there are guidelines about how the accession works. Both we have our own sort of regulations, but then also we're part of a consortium of museums or a group of museums that all adhere to this ethical code. We do not sell art to pay for expenses. It's just not something we do. So we will continue to deaccession works because we need to refine our collection. Sometimes something has entered the collection and it duplicates. It's a better example of another. Part of our expense is to store this art. It costs something to keep the art. And if we don't really have plans to use it, another institution may be happy to have those works in their own care. But it is not to meet expenses or a deficit.
Something else I want to ask you about that I feel is bubbling up more, and I think it's because, again, of this moment where a lot of museums are financially strapped, especially feeling the pressures from the federal government, and this is this notion of sharing, museums entering partnerships. Is that something, especially as a new leader at the MFA, that you think might become more of a norm?
If you're alluding to sharing, I mean, museums, I think, by design are sharers in the sense that...
I think more, yes, we know that loans happen, but maybe you acquire works together. So you're spending together, buying together.
It's a promising area. Some museums do that, but it's always really complex. It depends on how far your partner is and what are the risks of transporting the art back and forth. But that's a good model. In general, we have a lot of our objects in storage. They are in storage because they're light sensitive. So it's not that we don't want to share them. Yeah. It's just that the Winslow Homer exhibition was an example. Watercolors would degrade when exposed to light for a certain amount of time. And so a lot of the things we have are ultimately designed to rotate in and to be seen more. We're working closely with some museums about sharing our collection, put them in their own galleries, because we have, we could say, so much in certain areas. And the question is, even internationally speaking, there are some institutions that are approaching us and say, could we feature this art form of which we have none, and would you be a partner to do that? And we're open to these discussions.
Well, final question, to go back to some of the difficult subject matter we were talking about, the criticism. There is repair work now to be done with the community who presented their concerns and has still asked even for the reinstatement of some curators. What's your message to the community at this juncture in terms of rebuilding that relationship, which has been harmed at this point?
Yeah, I would say to the community that the community has every reason to be alarmed. We live in times where there's a lot of concern about the state of the world, the state of our country, and there are, of course, a lot of actual attacks. And therefore, that's in part the lens through which one is seeing what is happening at the MFA. And I'm just here to tell the community that we're not walking back on our values. We're not walking back on our commitments, that we're in the existential moment, in the bind, where we absolutely have to stabilize this museum. That I cannot expect trust. Trust is earned. That my colleagues and I will seek to earn it. I know it's going to take some time, but that's our commitment, and our actions hopefully will speak for our values and for a commitment we're making.
Including your being here today to talk about it. Pierre Turjanian, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Jared. Such a pleasure.
Pierre Turjanian is the director of the Museum of Fine Arts. Coming up, John Sayles, the Oscar-nominated filmmaker and novelist, on Crucible, his new book that takes us into Henry Ford's America, for as long as the industry titan could keep it. He's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
there's a new show on GBH 89.7, The Curiosity Desk. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Join me for a daily dose of questions, answers, and more questions. Stories big and mainly small, driving the zeitgeist. Like, what even is a zeitgeist?
It's a German word. Basically means spirit of the times.
See? Like that. It's all on The Curiosity Desk, weekdays at 1 here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And the Umbrella Arts Center in Concord, Massachusetts, presenting Harper Lee's classic To Kill a Mockingbird, live on stage February 27th through March 22nd. Tickets and information at theumbrellaarts.org. And Boston College, with its year-long in-person fellowship, Boston College Companions. Accomplished professionals can reflect together, explore new directions, and consider the next step on their journey. More at bc.edu/nextchapter. And the Massachusetts Teachers Association, working together to ensure that all students have the resources they need to succeed. The MTA, a diverse union of education workers committed to the public schools and colleges our communities deserve.
For that next birthday, holiday, or special occasion, you can give a standout gift. A GBH membership. Thousands of hours of your favorite PBS shows, event deals, and local business discounts. Learn more at gbh.org/gift membership.
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show, live on 89.7 and streaming on the GBH News YouTube channel. A programming note, tune in Thursday for the one and only Alan Cumming, here to talk traders and more. But right now, John Sayles has spent decades telling big American stories. As a filmmaker and screenwriter, he made films including Passion Fish, 8 Men Out, and Lone Star. Dramas grounded in history, politics, and the forces that shape American life. As a novelist, he's brought that same ambition to the page in his novels including A Moment in the Sun and Jamie McGillivray. His new novel, Crucible, returns him to the intersection of American history and power, with a cinematic sweep that only Sayles could conjure. It's set in the early decades of the 20th century, unfolding in Henry Ford's Detroit, a world of assembly lines, immigrant labor, and high-stakes battles over workers' rights. It also takes us to Brazil, where Ford had his sights on manufacturing his own rubber, and it's filled with fascinating cameos, Frida Kahlo, Diego Rivera, Walt Disney, and Joe Louis, to name a few. Sayles is known for digging deep into archives, into character, into the moral gray zones of American life. In Crucible, he does it again with a richly imagined, clear-eyed historical epic. Tonight, you can catch him at Porter Square Books in Cambridge at 7 for a book event. John Sayles, welcome back to The Culture Show. It's great to see you.
Great to be here again.
It was great to read this book. I especially enjoyed it because it was so much history that I didn't realize, starting with this godlike figure as he wanted people to see him in Henry Ford. How were you drawn to him as a figure in terms of creating this story?
Well, some of it came from me thinking about Detroit for a long time and feeling like, here's a city that's not just something that used to be a major, American city, the place where all the automobiles came from when I was a kid, the place where a working guy could own his own car and own his own house. And that was partly responsible for that was Henry Ford, who famously at one point said, I'm just going to pay my workers twice what anybody else is getting for the same work so they can afford to buy a Model T and not just make one. He was America's favorite tycoon at one point. And then things got complicated, and he couldn't keep up with the complications. So that there's a way in which Detroit has been kind of the frontline soldier in many of the big American battles that we think of that we're still dealing with.
Well, just keep on him for one more moment. I was struck by the lengths that he goes, especially in your novel, as you depict it, to control the press, to control police. He's controlling government and power, especially when a labor union forms. We first see organized labor in this country rising up against him, and then he really has to bare his teeth. But until that happens, he has control over pretty much all aspects of his society.
Yeah, I think probably the manufacturer's ideal at that time was the company store model that happened in the coal fields that, I dealt with in our movie Matewan, where your workers lived in houses that you owned, and they didn't get paid in money. They got paid in company scrip, which they could only spend at the company store. So you got a lot of their salary back. He didn't quite have that, but he wanted something like that. On the other hand, some of it was he thought he was doing a wonderful thing. He thought, like certain other kind of car manufacturers these days, that he knew how people should live. And he had the power to actually influence and enforce some of those things. Michigan went dry a year before Prohibition was, announced in the rest of the country, because Henry Ford didn't drink and he didn't think it was good for people, and he put a lot of pressure on, the state, and they passed a law before the U.S. ratified a national law against drinking alcohol.
Well, where your novel also succeeds is when, of course, you're moving us away from and down from Henry Ford, and we're meeting all of the quote-unquote real people who are trying to live their lives. And these are women and blacks and Jews and all manner of people who are just trying to get ahead and trying to come together when they're not being pulled apart in this environment.
Yeah, well, one thing is those are the people that you're going to get emotionally involved with. You figure Henry Ford can take care of himself. He's on the top of the pile. He'll survive this thing. But the other people, one thing I often talk to my actors about when I'm working on a movie is don't play the end of the scene at the beginning of the scene. Yeah. You haven't read this. Your character has not read the script. So if you're a worker at the Ford plant and you're African American in the early 30s and there's this union thing happening, well, unions have traditionally, from your experience, been exclusive. They have not been open-armed about Chinese people or black people joining them. So is there a place for you in this union? Should you vote for it? Or is this just another thing that might threaten your job? And you're getting paid, unlike anybody else in Detroit or the rest of the country, the same thing as white workers are getting. Henry Ford was paying equal wages to African Americans. So, a bunch of my characters, they haven't read this book. They haven't read the history books. They don't know. Maybe communism will solve everything in 3 years if you just, go to the marches and, the meetings and stuff like that and recruit more members. Maybe this union thing is just a fad and it's not going to catch on.
What's the research that you engaged in to get into all of these characters, their struggles, how they would have seen and interpreted these events unfolding before them?
Well, academics help. A guy named Greg Grandin wrote a wonderful book called Fordlandia about Henry Ford's adventure in Brazil, buying all this land in the Amazon and trying to make a rubber plantation. Other people write more scholarly kind of things about, black people on the assembly line at Ford during these years or whatever. But then you have the newspapers of the time. The Detroit Free Press and the Hearst paper, and then there was a left-wing paper and a Polish paper and a African American newspaper, and you can get into those archives and read them. You can get into people's autobiographies. Sometimes you can find their diaries, have been found and published. So you try to put enough of that together that you just get a feeling, not just for the headlines, but very often the headlines, they don't know what's really going on either. And that only becomes clear 10, 15, 20 years, down the way. But then you get people writing letters to each other about what's going on here. You should come up. There's jobs at Ford, and they're paying great wages. And then the disappointment as that turns out not to be, such a golden lining to life. So, you try to piece it together, and in my novels very often they're told in a kind of mosaic form. So you see events that were historical events through, maybe there's 3 of my characters there at the same time, and they all have a very, very different, idea of it going in, and so they see a different event.
I'm speaking with John Sayles, the Oscar-nominated filmmaker, screenwriter, and novelist, about his latest book, Crucible. And by the way, you can catch him at Porter Square Books in Cambridge tonight at 7. You just mentioned Fordlandia. So I loved this part of the book, especially because I knew nothing about it. So here we're spending all of this time in Detroit and everything that we've just discussed, then to realize that Henry Ford had this very misguided idea of what he could do in Brazil and just sending people there thinking he was going to manufacture magic, basically, and trying to not have to buy rubber from the other guys, but make his own rubber or get his own rubber to make tires. How do you encapsulate what this endeavor was?
Well, I'm afraid that it's a pretty good allegory for a lot of our foreign policy in the last 50 years. Yeah. It's a good example of the imperialist side of somebody who really does control Dearborn, has an awful lot of say over what happens in greater Detroit and even in the state of Michigan, and thinks, okay, I could just go to anywhere in the world, and I'm offering them these wonderful jobs and this opportunity to kind of come up, to our standards and my standard of what should be. Of course, they're going to be grateful. Has no idea, of what the culture is. Sends nobody who speaks any Portuguese, and has no idea how rubber trees grow. So he sends a bunch of people who have been working in sawmills for him. Well, they can cut trees down, and they'll have to cut the non-rubber trees down first, and then you cut trees down, you know how to plant them. To the point where in Fordlandia, you were expected to stay on the same time zone as Detroit, even though you were a couple time zones away in Brazil. So it was this little bubble, and he was very big on model communities. He had a bunch of small ones in the United States, and he thought, well, I'm going to apply my stuff there. Well, yes, it is nice to give your workers a little tiny house with a roof and a picket fence, but if the roof is made of the stuff that it's made in Michigan, it's going to turn into an oven in the summer. Yeah. And the people aren't going to be that thrilled about it.
Well, it was fascinating to think about these circumstances, this promise that people are given. Of course, within families, they're fighting over whether to actually do this or not, because obviously this is an extraordinary move to move from Detroit to Brazil, where there's disease, where there's heat, where they're not at all educated in local culture and customs. How did these people fare?
They struggled. They got very lucky, actually, in when they were first scouting the land that they had bought. A guy literally walked out of the jungle and started speaking to them in Southern inflected English, and he was a Confederado. He had come there as a boy at the end of the Civil War with a bunch of other Confederates who said, we're not going to live under that Yankee flag. And then they went down and they became rubber barons in the Brazilian jungle, and had a community that spoke eventually both Portuguese and English. The unmarried men, of course, married women of color because that's who was there. So the whole whites only thing kind of died very quickly. But he was one of the few people who spoke both languages there. So there was a lot of sign language going on. The lumbermen came down and, there's all these trees, and in true Ford fashion, we're not going to waste anything. We're going to make boards out of them and make wooden houses. And then they sent word back to Detroit, you're going to have to invent another kind of steel because our blades can't cut this hardwood. They're just seizing up here, and so we're piling all that valuable wood up and burning it in order to clear things because we can't cut it into boards.
Another really enjoyable aspect of your novel is the I was going to say celebrities, but I guess they were even in their time that we meet. Paul Robeson coming to speak to the factory workers, Henry Ford looking at this interesting couple to him, Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera, there to paint murals. What was it to be able to thread through these major characters that still have deep resonance to us today, who were on the ground then?
They're unavoidable. Certainly, one thing that people do. This covers 15 years of life in Detroit. Joe Louis was just, for some of these characters, just a neighbor. He and his family and his, come up, and he was a young guy, and his brother was working at one place. For a while, he had a job at one of the auto places, pushing automobiles off the production line out into the parking lot because he was a strong kid. And his amateur career was pretty good. He had a lot of knockouts, but he didn't win every fight. And it's kind of like, oh, nice kid. And then all of a sudden he starts to win. And before the thing is over, it was a major deal for African American people when he got to be the heavyweight champ. And then there's this strange thing that happens is when he fights Max Schmeling, he's like America's guy. He's not just the black people's guy. He's fighting against, Nazi Europe. And it was a huge deal when he won that fight. So, there is that thing that I'm interested in is how culture shifts. How Diego Rivera was there to make a mural, partly because Edsel was Henry Ford's son, was artistic. He was one of the guys who helped design very good looking cars right after the Model A came out. And he kind of, with a little smile on his face, hired this guy who was trying to get back into the Communist Party at the time to do a mural called Detroit Industry. And they did it in the Art Institute where, it was kind of ladies went to have lunch and they were used to nothing, kind of gritty in their sight. And he does this incredible mural. And Henry Ford sees him, at his kind of museum out his backyard window. And who's that fat guy who just won't leave and is looking at all my stuff? And they had a very nice lunch and I realized they had a lot of things in common. So you can't avoid those things. Sports are part of people's lives. Radio was huge then, not TV. So radio and movies are, popular songs. People's lives are, life goes on. Just because there's a battle happening between the union guys and the management and people get shot at doesn't mean that somebody doesn't go to the sports pages first or see what's playing at the movie theater.
Well, we see it happening today.
Exactly.
And how we live our own lives. John Sale, it's always so fascinating to speak with you. Congratulations on the latest book, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much.
John Sayles is an Oscar-nominated filmmaker, screenwriter, and novelist. His latest book is Crucible. He'll discuss the novel in person at Porter Square Books in Cambridge tonight at 7. Thank you again. Coming up, award-winning playwright Ken Urban digs into the psychological cost of scrutinizing the internet to weed out its most horrific content in his blistering new show, The Moderate. He's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
From a European conflict zone,
driving north from Kyiv, the signs of war start to be more visible.
To hard times in Southeast Asia.
I meet a man who has been waiting in line for diesel for 6 days.
To the astonishing beauty of remote places.
My welcome to the waters off of East Greenland has come from 2 whales.
Let us take you there. Listen to the world.
This afternoon at 3 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Cambridge School of Culinary Arts in Porter Square, offering private cooking events for your next team building activity, family reunion, birthday party, or night out. You can learn more at cambridgeculinary.com. And the Boston Symphony Orchestra. This March, Yunchan Lim performs Schumann's Piano Concerto and Renee Fleming sings excerpts from Nixon in China. April 14th, the Explorer Concert features Beethoven's Fifth anew. bso.org. And Rockland Trust Bank, helping foster healthy relationships with money by providing education and resources to the community, one neighborhood at a time. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC.
GBH News is your home for trusted local news. Get it at 89.7 on the radio, gbhnews.org, and subscribe to the GBH News YouTube channel. GBH News, what matters to you.
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show, live on 89.7 and streaming on the GBH News YouTube channel. Playwright Ken Urban is an award-winning writer known for sharp, contemporary dramas that put ordinary people under extraordinary pressure. In his widely acclaimed play, A Guide for the Homesick, what starts as a chance encounter between 2 men becomes a night of confession, as the stories they tell keep raising the stakes. In The Remains, Theo and Kevin, a gay married couple, host a family dinner to share life-changing news when the evening becomes a stress test for the marriage. His new play, The Moderate, follows Frank, a man who's takes a job as a content moderator for a global social media company. Sounds like Schmegbook, maybe. Sorting through an endless stream of horrifically disturbing posts and images, he begins to find the worst of mankind seeping into his core, and his core struggle becomes what he can do individually to nurture humanity. The Moderate is on stage at Central Square Theater through March 1st, and Ken Urban joins us to talk about the human stakes behind life on the digital front lines. Welcome to the show. Congratulations on your show. I saw it this weekend. It's a wow.
Thank you. It's been quite something.
Well, I don't even know where to begin with this, that there are actual jobs done by human beings where their job is to look at the worst, some of the worst possible things to be posted on the internet, so bad that they have to be taken down so that a company like Facebook doesn't lose advertising because of it. How did you find your way into this?
I think it started in like summer of 2019. So like right before the pandemic, I encountered an article about content moderators on the Washington Post. And it was fascinating to me because I had not ever heard of this job before. And then from there, I read a book by Sarah T. Roberts, who was like, I think the first person to actually kind of take this job seriously. And her book had a lot of interviews with people that had worked for various social media companies as content moderators. I also saw a German documentary called The Cleaners, which had a number of people who worked in the Philippines as content moderators. And so I thought this would be a really fascinating play. And so I submitted my idea to the Sloan Foundation for a commission to work on a play about the topic, and then promptly forgot about it because then the world shut down. And so I assumed it was just not going to happen. Yeah. And then to my surprise, in April of 2020, I got a phone call saying that I got the commission to write this play. But like most people, I thought, well, the theaters are closed. Who knows if anyone's going to come back? But by the fall, I started doing research. And so since everybody was home, it was easy to reach out to people. So I talked to Sarah Roberts, who wrote the book. From there, she led me to other scholars. I talked to Andrew Morantz at The New Yorker. And then from there, people started to open up to me. And so I got to talk to actual content moderators, including someone at Microsoft, whose job is taking off child porn and terrorism videos from their online platforms. And so that material became the basis for the first draft of the play. But because I was developing the play with actors online, on Zoom, basically, I started to think about that as being part of the story of the play as well.
Yeah, because I should mention that this is set during COVID, so everybody is at home, including Frank, this central character, who is in his home. I think that's a whole other added element to have these images go into your own personal, intimate space. It's not like you're seeing him in an office and then walking home and having the security and safety of home. Well, what did you begin to glean was happening to people who were telling you about doing the job, and how we see that distilled in this character, Frank?
Well, what I learned is that, yes, there is a lot of traumatic content that you encounter, especially violence and especially abuse of children, which I very naively did not think was a big part of the internet, and only to discover that during the pandemic, child porn on a platform like YouTube, for instance, had skyrocketed over 300%. So I started to see like what would happen to someone, what would happen to my character seeing this material at home. But also I started to understand how much these workers were valuable. Like what they did was incredibly important and necessary. And so I wanted to honor them in a way with this story, and not just write them off as like, oh, they're going to go crazy or be traumatized by this stuff. And as one scholar said to me, Mary Gray, quite pointedly, she's like, you probably look at pornography online. It doesn't traumatize you. So like just because an Indian housewife looks at it, a lot of dick pics during the course of her job, that doesn't necessarily traumatize her. So I felt like, okay, I want to tell a story where it's not just about the trauma, but about the community and the possibilities that this kind of work make possible.
Well, I want to stop here and talk about the audience experience, because as you're describing all of this, I'm realizing, well, to some degree, I experienced it on Saturday night when I was there, because in what I think is some of the most extraordinary staging I've ever seen on a Boston stage, you have these screens, you and your team have these screens that are placed up so that we are watching the images in very large format that Frank is seeing as he's passing through, whether they're pornographic or there were a couple moments where I had to put my head down. What is the intention there of putting the audience, the psychology of putting the audience in Frank's head?
First of all, our director, Jared, is a genius. He's also an amazing projection designer. So his ability to like be working with the actors and then helping realize the visual elements as we were rehearsing was just a huge part of the process. We rehearsed on set. We started working with cameras. I think it was the second or third day of rehearsal, because how you deliver a scene is so dependent on the fact that like the actor is actually in another room and is zooming in to the main theater. And so that really also helped me develop my sense of how the play would work on stage. I began to realize as we were all locked at home, the 2020 election was happening, that we were all becoming content moderators. We were all spending all day in front of our screens. And so for me, I thought the bold choice with the play was like, what if we showed the audience that? And at first we were like kind of hemmed and hawed, but then in 2024, Central Square allowed us to do a week-long workshop. And so Jared and I were like, let's try it with all the images visible. And we just worked on like the first couple of scenes in the play. And what we realized was the power that those images had. And so you felt like you were in Frank's mind. It was his journey became your journey. And so it felt ethically important for us that would be part of the production.
And I should mention, Jared is also the name of your director. You're not just referencing me, of course, so that people don't get confused. Well, did you have a debate about how far you would take it? As I mentioned, there were a few moments where I looked down because I didn't want to see the images on screen. I noticed on Saturday night a few people walked out.
Yes. We've had walkouts. Thursday, Friday, we didn't. But then by the weekend, we started having a couple, which I totally understand. And some people said to the front of house staff, like, we really love the play, but just some of it was too intense for us, which I totally respect. Because a lot of the video content in the show we created, so like Jared and I would shoot the material with actors at various locations in Boston, including the young boy, Sean, who plays Gus in the show. We thought very much about what you would see and what you wouldn't see. And actually, a lot of it is unseen, the actual kind of graphic violence that happens in the videos. But the sound of it or the framing of it tells a huge story so that almost the audience is feeling it in their head. And strangely, someone said to me after the show on Saturday, they were so excited when the dick pics came because they're like, that was my refuge because at least I could handle that versus like something like a shooting. And I do. I think like to understand what Frank goes through, you have to put yourself in that position. And the truth of the matter is you have a different response watching those kinds of images and videos in a large group. Like we've all watched genocides happen on our phones, scrolling through Instagram. But there's something about seeing those kinds of images when you're sitting in a room with 150 other people that really changes your view of that material. It like reanimates it in a way. And that felt to me important about the play.
And I want to echo and affirm that as well. I don't want to suggest that people shouldn't see this because obviously I thought it was very important and I thought it was stunning and striking the way you presented it. I'm speaking with Ken Urban, an award-winning playwright. We're talking about his new play, The Moderate, on stage at Central Square Theater through March 1st. Another element was the instructions that Frank, again, this content moderator, is given, that he's not even allowed to decide which images he's going to reject. It's really this social media company, again, you could take it to be Facebook, is telling him what they consider racist. For instance, blackface is not considered racist, according to this social media company. That's a tough pill to swallow, that you're adhering to someone else's moral code.
Yeah, and that's part of what these workers have to do is that there's this ever-evolving, constantly updated wiki that they have to refer to, and it takes a lot of pressure for the moderators to be like, hey, we need better guidelines because actually these guidelines lets a lot of material slip. And the play is set in 2020, and it's only gotten worse now, especially on Facebook, because since the second Trump presidency, the company has gotten rid of most fact checkers. So like in 2020, like a Trump meme proclaiming that like that ridiculous medicine that horse tranquilizer or whatever it was going to cure you of your COVID, or bleach, like that stuff was taken down from Facebook. Now that's not the case. So it's, again, a reminder that this job is so important because they're really interpreting the material that we see. So is a painting of Trump naked with a micro penis, is that artistic? Is that a political statement? They have to make those kinds of decisions. And it's a really complicated job. And it's like a mix of being like a paramedic and a librarian in a way. Because you have to look up your wiki and be like, oh, is this true? Is this false? Is this image a documentation of a war crime? So therefore it is an image that's violent. But if Facebook doesn't allow it, then there's not that record, that firsthand record of something that's happening in the world.
I also want to ask you about another moral quandary we see Frank face. You just mentioned a young boy who's not young, he's probably about a teenager, who's posting videos about, sort of a vlog actually, about being beaten by his father. And Frank, of course, as somebody who's seeing a recurrence of these posted videos, wants to do something about it. Again, this is against the policy of the company. How do these social media companies act, and what do they instruct their employees when they see something that could be criminal behavior or could be suggesting criminal behavior?
Well, Facebook's policy at the time in 2020 was that depictions of actual harm had to be pulled from the site, but like videos that discussed harm, whether actual or imaginary, could stay. And so in my play, and ultimately this is a play about a father-son relationship, which is something that I've always kind of, I have a challenging relationship with my father. And so it was something I've always wanted to write about. But this, strangely, content moderation became a place to think about those things, because Frank, as a father, watching this young man document his own abuse, he feels like a moral imperative that he needs to help this young man because nobody else is going to. And so one of the things that's possible is that the more information he can glean, he can file a report, and then actually things can improve for people. And that is true. I talked to content moderators who watched children being abused sexually in videos, and they were able to get enough information from the videos, they could file a report, and sometimes that parent ended up in jail and the child was rescued. And so they feel very strongly that what they do really matters. And so I wanted that to be a part of the story too, is like, what does it mean to be a father and to watch a young man, a teenager who you don't know and you might never meet, to feel like I have to help that person for real.
I like what you said toward the start of this interview about writing this in a way to honor these frontline social media workers who are doing this work. And there's this question that is posed toward the end of the play, or at least we ingest this at the end of the play, that will this job make you better or break you? For the people you did talk to, have they been doing this for a while? Did they get past what we all might experience is just a horrific job and a traumatic job, to be able to recognize, I'm doing a lot of good here and I have figured out how to manage this?
Some have. Some, after their first 18 months, can't continue, and especially the pay is not great, and there's no union of any sort. But speaking to the senior content moderator at Microsoft, he was able, through his own advocacy, to get therapists for everybody. They work together in a call center, not during COVID, so that people look out for each other. And he had done it for 10 years. At the same time, this was a man about my father's age, I believe. I don't know his real name because these people are not allowed to talk about their jobs. They're breaking their NDAs by talking to me. So I made sure that everything was private and I don't use anybody's real name in the show. And even my graduate student who helped do the transcripts of all the interviews, like, they don't know their real names either. He broke down in tears a number of times, and he told me this story about how his son walked in when he was home alone, when he was home working, to bring him a bagel, and there was a beheading video on his screen. And then he just like broke it down into tears. And I was like, oh my God, this is a man I've never met. I'm talking to him on his phone. I don't know his real name. And he's had this experience. And so, yeah, I felt like this is a way, theater was a way to like put the audience through an intense experience. There is a lot of humor in the play. You'd be surprised how funny a succession of dick pics could possibly be. And even the older audiences have found that amusing. But yeah, it's. I do think there is this job is not going away. Everybody I spoke with said AI will never be smart enough to figure this stuff out because it involves interpretation. So I did speak to people who, they found their way through, and they're like, it's a job. I own a house. That's more than I can say as a playwright. So.
See, you're always bringing humor into these circumstances.
I try.
Ken Urban, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Ken Urban is an award-winning playwright. The Moderate is on stage at Central Square Theater through March 1st. To learn more, check out their website. Thank you for listening to another edition of The Culture Show. Tune in tomorrow or join us live at the Boston Public Library for the founder of JP Licks on their new flavors and why we hardy New Englanders eat ice cream all winter long. And Boston Architectural College President Mahesh Das joins us to talk about resilient architecture and how California is rebuilding after the wildfires. The Culture Show crew is Max Chow-Gillette, Kate Dellis, and Chelsea Murs. Our engineer is Bill Piacitelli. Our intern is Anna Hu. Colin Cockrell produced our YouTube live stream today. I'm Jared Bowen. Have a great day.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
GBH's All Things Considered.